Chapter 1036. Hey, aren't those the people from the Seven-Star Sword School? Why are they with the people from the Gimdeo sect? Soon, everyone realized that something was amiss. The 20 youths on the stage were obviously from two different factions. One of them had a sword symbol embroidered on the chest of their robes, while the other had a golden saber symbol. Moreover, they were each holding a saber and a sword respectively. Both factions had 10 people each, which was half of the total. Many people who recognized the symbols of the Seven-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect were surprised. They couldn't understand why the Seven-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect would stand together. Looks like they've teamed up, and they're even using the name of the Gimdeo sect. Someone murmured and made such a conjecture. The Gimdeo sect and the Seven-Star Sword School have teamed up. Both of them are third-rate factions. Looking at the 20 people on the stage, I'm afraid they're the most outstanding 10 from the two sects. If they join forces like this, their strength will be too strong. Any sect that faces them alone will have almost no chance of winning. Why would they team up and challenge the young man from the Bawang sect? The crowd began to clamor, and many people had doubts in their hearts. It was obvious that the 20 disciples from the Gimdeo sect and the Seven-Star Sword School were the most outstanding ones. Yet, these people teamed up to challenge a tough nut to crack. Normally speaking, this wasn't a wise move. Moreover, very few sects were willing to team up with others. Using the name of others to fight was no different from establishing prestige for others. It was a thankless task. You guys don't know, right? Not long ago, the people from the Seven-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect suffered great losses at the hands of that young man. The young sect masters of the two sects died at his hands. The Seven-Star Sword School even lost 2 Origin Emperor Realm Elders because of the Bawang sect. Even the Origin Stone Mine was destroyed. Suddenly, someone said mysteriously to the people around him. This was a rogue cultivator. Some time ago, he had walked in the forest near Sword Star City. Naturally, he knew that the Seven-Star Sword School had issued a bounty for the youth and had also seen his portrait. Now that he had shared what he knew with the crowd, he immediately became the focus of everyone's attention. This caused the loose cultivator's morale to soar and his image to become even greater. So there's such a reason. If that's the case, then the Seven-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect have a grudge that's hard to resolve between them. Someone nodded in understanding. Of course, this young man wasn't the only one who was powerful in the Bawang sect. It was said that there were a few Emperor-level experts in the sect. Even the Gimdeo sect and the Seven-Star Sword School would have to retreat if they encountered them alone. That's why they joined forces to find that young man. I didn't expect the two sects to join forces during the Alliance Conference. As the rogue cultivator spoke, he roughly explained the situation that he knew. Everyone around him was stunned as they listened. As a result, many people began to pay attention to the young man and the Bawang sect. How was this a reckless young man? He was clearly a tiger that had descended from the mountains. It was also their fault for being outdated. It turned out that the young man had already caused a ruckus among several third-rate forces some time ago. To be able to make the Gimdeo sect and the Seven-Star Sword School put aside their differences and join forces, one could see how deep their hatred for the young man was. He had killed the young sect masters of the two sections. This enmity was indeed too great. Through the mouths of the few sectless cultivators that had seen Su Yi's portrait and had come to Nine-Star City, the news of the enmity between the Seven-Star Sword sect and the Golden Saber sect spread like wildfire in the enormous square. At the same time, the powerful strength of the Bawang sect was also being talked about enthusiastically by the crowd. The forces of the Chaos territory rise and fall frequently. It's not difficult to understand that a powerful Bawang sect suddenly emerged. So, we better not look down on him. Just because we haven't heard of the Bawang sect, we think that he's a pushover. There were also a few people who hadn't ridiculed the young man and the Bawang sect before. So, when they heard the news, they couldn't help but say such things. As soon as these words came out, it instantly attracted countless hostile gazes. Perhaps he didn't realize that he had directly slapped a lot of people. Naturally, he didn't receive any good looks, especially the words "look down on him." It was completely attracting hatred. However, the surrounding people were also resentful. Indeed, they had underestimated the Bawang sect before. It was fine if they were scolded. Dad, what should we do? Can Sue-yi handle it alone? In the crowd, Jihan Nua looked at the 20 figures on the stage and couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She knew that Sue-yi was very strong, but no matter how strong he was only one person. If it was just a sect like the Jixin sect, then it would be fine. However, this was the Gimdeo sect and the 7-Star Sword School joining forces. They were too strong. No matter how terrifying Sui was, he would probably be in big trouble. Why are you so anxious, girl? Ji Tianfu rolled his eyes at his daughter and said, let's not talk about whether Su Yi's strength will really be defeated. Even if it is, can't he take the initiative to admit defeat? After all, he's one of the first 10 people on the stage. He still has 2 more chances to challenge. Oh. Jihan nodded vigorously and stuck out her tongue. She was so nervous just now that she had forgotten this point. Looking at his daughter's silly look, Ji Tianfu felt even more helpless. The experts from the Gimdeo sect and the 7-Star Sword School are all in the top 10 of their respective sects. That guy's in trouble now. The weakest of the 20 is at the 5th level of Yuanjun stage, and the strongest is at the 8th level of Yuanjun stage. There are even 2 of them. With these 20 people joining forces, even an expert who just entered the Yuanjun stage wouldn't dare to face them head-on. Most importantly, the 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect aren't just going to challenge. They're going to kill that young man. That Bawang sect kid is strong, but I'm afraid he won't be able to win this time. That's right. Even among the first-rate sects, I'm afraid you won't be able to find someone of the younger generation who has this kind of ability. Moreover, that young man is only 17 years old. I wonder if that kid will admit defeat in the end, or die in the hands of those 2 sects. Among the other sects, there were all sorts of voices. After knowing what the Bawang sect had done, no one dared to underestimate the 2 sects anymore. However, at this point, even if the 7-Star Sword School and the Bawang sect joined forces, no one would still be optimistic about that young man. One person against the 20 most outstanding people from the 2 sections. Among the first-rate sects, it might be possible to find a young expert under the age of 30, but would there be 1, 2, or 3? But that young man was only 17 years old. No one thought that he had the ability to withstand the combined forces of the 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect. Most of the countless people in the crowd had the same thought. However, there were also some people who couldn't help but worry about Su-yi, such as the siblings from the Liu sect and Chinchun, who was with the people from the Yangyan sect. However, there was also a group of people who were extremely calm. They were Merciless West, the Green Emperor, the Yin-Yang Emperor of the Dead, the Devouring Spirit Emperor, and Huangjian. Needless to say, Handsome Su was sleeping soundly in Merciless West's arms. The 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect. In the arena, Su-yi looked at the 20 young people in front of him with sparkling eyes. He was slightly surprised. Just as he was about to automatically advance, these people suddenly jumped out. When he took a closer look, it turned out that the 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect had joined forces. It seemed that these 2 sects really didn't underestimate him. They had both sent a group of their best disciples to the arena. Kid, you shouldn't have made an enemy of our 2 sects. If you know what's good for you, you should take the initiative to surrender. We can give you a quick death and spare you the pain of the flesh. A disciple from the 7-Star Sword School walked out, pointed at Su-yi, and said loudly, "Why bother talking nonsense with this kid? Just kill him and let him know the price of making an enemy of us." A person from the Gimdeo sect snorted coldly. He raised the long saber in his hand and pointed it at Su-yi. The disciples of the 2 sects were all boiling with qi. It spread out in the void, causing the entire arena to emit a terrifying light. Their auras intertwined together, causing the air to tremble. The arena beneath their feet also emitted rumbling sounds. A monstrous, murderous aura spread out, making people's scalps tingle. In such a scene, Su-yi also slowly raised his eyebrows. Under the circulation of the primordial qi in his body, Everyone's discomfort was eliminated. People from the Gimdeo sect and the Seven-Star Sword School. He suddenly sneered, looked at the 20 figures in front of him, and said coldly, "I thought you would learn from your mistakes and not deliberately provoke me. Now it seems that you still haven't learned your lesson." He also wanted to kill the people from these two sections. The hatred had already been formed, and there was no way to resolve it. With his personality, as long as there was a chance, he naturally wouldn't let anyone from these two sects go. He really didn't expect that in the arena of the Alliance Conference's preliminaries, the two sects would join forces just to kill him. After thinking for a while, He understood the reason. It was not easy to fight in Nine-Star City, but it was possible in the arena. Under such circumstances, his big brother, the Green Emperor, and the others naturally couldn't make a move. For the Seven-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect, it was the best opportunity to kill him. In this regard, he certainly wouldn't be polite in the slightest, since these 20 people were the most outstanding disciples of the other sects. If all of them were left in the arena, Ran Jianxian and Yang Baiquan would be even more heartbroken. Chapter 1037. Chi. The aura on Su Yi's body spread out in the air, causing the spectators below the arena to suddenly tremble. This murderous aura was too terrifying. It was boundless and majestic. This was especially true for the people from the two sects standing in the arena. At this moment, their bodies tensed up and their souls trembled. They stood in front of Su Yi and could clearly see that in the young man's eyes, those pupils seemed to reflect some kind of terrifying and ominous creature. What a strange kid. He's very scary. Don't underestimate him. Let's attack together and kill him. The 20 disciples of the Seven-Star Sword sect and Golden Saber sect forcefully suppressed the astonishment in their hearts, and then 20 figures instantly charged out. They formed a formation that advanced and retreated in an orderly manner as they besieged Su Yi. Before they went on stage, Ran Jianxian and Yang Baiquan had warned them not to underestimate the enemy. Even a lion would use all its strength to hunt a rabbit, not to mention that this kid's cultivation was higher than all of them. They could not afford to be careless at all. "Give me your life," a disciple of the Seven-Star Sword School shouted loudly. The long sword in his hand emitted a bright green light. He raised it above his head, forming a terrifying sword light, and slashed down. This was the wood elemental vitality. It was full of vitality and contained boundless killing power. Kill him. Next to him, there was also a young man with a big saber facing the sky. It was shining with a golden light, and a sharp aura swept out. For a moment, all kinds of lights in the arena shot up into the sky. The sound of swords and sabers rang together, and all of them attacked Su Yi. Unparalleled energy boiled and shook crazily, causing the momentum here to be extremely vast, suppressing the momentum of the other arenas. As expected of the strongest person selected from the two sections. He is indeed terrifying. Someone below the arena murmured with a trembling gaze. That scene was very terrifying, especially when they attacked the same person at the same time. It was like a raging wave hitting the shore, difficult to resist. Under the gaze of many people, they only felt that the young man opposite them would be very troublesome. However, in the next moment, they also saw the young man move. Kill. Seeing that the other party was charging at him, Su Yi retrieved a long saber that was only a mysterious weapon from his interspatial bag. He held it in his hand and shouted coldly. Subsequently, he soared into the air with a swoosh, and his feet repeatedly moved in the air. A series of mysterious and mystical footwork appeared under his feet. This was the Skyward 100 transformation steps, and it was known for its unpredictable and erratic movements. Under Su Yi's display, this set of movement technique was operated to the extreme, causing his figure to turn into an unfathomable phantom. "Die, you little bastard," someone shouted. Then, a sharp sword pierced through Su Yi's body from the side. "Disciples of the Seven-Star Sword School, go and be buried with your young master." However, before this person could rejoice, in the next moment, such a voice rang out in this disciple's ears, causing him to be shocked. He realized that he had stabbed nothing but air. His sword had only hit an afterimage. Unknowingly, a saber light flashed in front of him and went straight for the top of his head. Such a scene caused the hair on this disciple of the 7-star sword school to stand on end. He was unable to fully defend himself, so he could only hurriedly withdraw his long sword and block with all his might. Swish! When the saber light completely struck, this disciple could only watch as the sword in his hand was cut in half. Then his body was brazenly cut open from the middle. Blood gushed out like a fountain and sprayed in the air, creating a bloody mist. Su-yi rushed through the two halves of the body that were slowly falling down. Under the protection of his vitality, not a single drop of blood stained his clothes. The first one. When these 3 words came out of Su-yi's mouth, the skyward hunter transformation steps under his feet did not stop at all. His eyes, however, glanced at another disciple of the Gimdeo sect. His body moved in the air and forcefully dodged several saber and sword lights that were attacking him. Then he appeared next to his target. "Kill!" Su-yi shouted loudly. The saber in his hand slashed out in an unstoppable manner. The saber light was like a long rainbow that crossed the sky. It was like a waterfall as it slashed out diagonally. In an instant, it broke through the Gimdeo sect disciple's defense. It cut through his right shoulder and came out from his left abdomen. His entire body was cut in half, and he died an unnatural death. The second one, Su-yi said coldly again. His eyes turned again and stared at the third person. The dense saber light and sword light moved horizontally like a violent storm, trying to roll Su-yi's body. However, his body was extremely erratic. He was suddenly in the east and suddenly in the west. There was no trace of him at all. None of the attacks from the disciples of the Gimdeo sect and the 7-star sword school could land on his body. Die! Su-yi raised the long saber in his hand again. As his body spun, energy erupted and lingered around the neck of a disciple of the 7-star sword school. Then a head flew into the sky. Then it was twisted into a bloody mist in the terrifying storm of attacks. The third one. At this moment, Su-yi was like the god of death. With every strike of his saber, he reaped a life. However, after killing several people in a row, his robe was not stained with the slightest bit of blood. Such a scene made people feel even more terrified. What powerful strength! What powerful techniques! The onlookers below the stage were all stunned at this moment. The killing intent that burst out from Su-yi's body made everyone's scalp tingle. With every strike of his saber, he killed a person. How domineering was that? Everyone realized that this young man from the Bawang sect was definitely not to be trifled with. When he dealt with the Jishin sect, he only injured everyone. However, when faced with the murderous intent of the 7-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect, this young man did not show any mercy. With his powerful strength, it only took a short while for him to kill several of the enemy's disciples. How can this little bastard be so strong? How can he be so strong? Among the disciples of the 7-star sword school below the stage, Ran Jinshuan's fat hands were clenched into fists. His fingernails were embedded in his flesh, but he did not feel the slightest bit of pain. Su-yi's strength shocked him. Facing the encirclement of 20 people at the same time, he was still calm and could kill several people in a row. This was too terrifying. How could such a person appear in the younger generation? We must hold on and kill that kid. Yang Baikuin's face was gloomy to the extreme. He was clenching his teeth so hard that they almost broke. The two sects had placed all their hopes on the disciples on the stage. They only hoped that those people could successfully kill Su-yi. However, they really did not expect that young man to be so strong. When every disciple died in the hands of the opponent, whether it was Yang Baikuin or Ran Jianxian, it was as if someone had taken a knife and cut off their flesh piece by piece. It was so painful that it dripped blood. The other disciples of the two sects who were watching the battle also looked extremely gloomy. At this moment, after Su-yi killed the third disciple, his gaze moved again. He was staring at a new target. This time, it was another disciple of the Gimdeo sect. Chila. The saber collided with the saber. Just from momentum alone, the Gimdeo sect disciple's saber force was stronger. However, the dazzling golden saber force was defeated by Su Yi's long saber. It could not resist at all. The saber in Su Yi's hand pierced through the opponent's chest and came out from the back. It pierced through the opponent's heart. The fourth one, Su Yi turned into the god of death. The murderous look in his eyes was extremely terrifying. He was like a wild beast. Every time he stared at the disciples of the seven-star sword school and Gimdeo sect, it was as if he had set his eyes on a prey. He would pounce on them and take them down instantly. Under the effect of the Fuyao's 100 transformation steps, Su Yi's body moved swiftly. He appeared and disappeared like a ghost. He wantonly shuttled between the disciples of the seven-star sword school and Gimdeo sect. None of the attacks managed to touch his body at all. Poo-poo-poo. One after another, muffled sounds reverberated in the arena. Every time Su Yi raised his saber, it was accompanied by the end of a life. A rain of blood sprayed from the sky and trickled down. Such a scene truly shocked everyone present. The young man's methods were too bloody. No one who was targeted by him survived. They were all killed in one blow. They were all dead. In less than half an instant's time, 9 people from the seven-star sword school and Gimdeo sect died in his hands. Such a decisive and murderous character, even in the chaos zone, sent chills down people's spines. That young man was really too scary. The people from a Gimdeo sect and seven-star sword school did not go up to kill. They were just sending themselves to death. How long has it been? Almost half of the 20 people died. But that young man from the Bawang sect did not even have a tear on his clothes. That's too scary. That young man is too scary. This is an absolute suppression of strength. There really is such a genius in this world. He is only 17 years old, and he can reach such a level. When he grows up, how scary will he be? All the spectators were boiling. The battles in the other arenas were interrupted again. Everyone looked at the young man's figure in shock. He moved up and down like a fleeing rabbit. Everyone was shocked to the extreme, including the Alliance's experts in the stands. Some of them had already stood up. Su Yi's talent was beyond their imagination. If the young man could be described as terrifying when he killed the 20 people from the Jishin sect, then he could only be described as abnormal now. We lost. We still lost. Ran Jinchuan's finger bones were almost broken. There was a GG sound. It was obvious how irritable he was. We still underestimated him too much. How can that young man be so strong? Yang Baikuin's eyes were full of hatred, but at the same time, they were full of helplessness. Su Yi's strength was too strong. It was far beyond their expectations. They had thought that sending out 20 of their strongest disciples was already a sign that they were paying enough attention to the other party. Chapter 1038. The difference in strength between the two parties was too great. It was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross. Based on the difference in strength, even if the seven-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect sent another 20 people to fight, the result would be the same. They would only be massacred by the young man from the Bawang sect. Finally, when almost half of their disciples were dead, Ran Jinxian and Yang Baikuin decided to admit defeat. Indeed, they had already lost. If they continued to fight, they would only be sending the remaining 11 disciples to their deaths. One had to know that each of these carefully selected disciples was a rare and outstanding person. The death of any one of them would be an unimaginable loss. Now that 9 of them had been killed by the young man, the two sects had already suffered a heavy blow. If the remaining people were to die here, the two sects would not be able to bear the consequences. Kill. However, Su Yi did not care about this. He still shouted as his figure flashed and the light of his sword followed. He slashed down fiercely again. A blazing aura spread out and directly cut a Gimdeo sect disciple in half. Bastard! Seeing that another disciple had been killed, Yang Baikuin shouted angrily, but there was nothing he could do. He really wanted to rush up to the arena and kill the young man with one blow. However, he did not have the guts. Even if he had 10,000 guts, he would not dare to violate the rules of the Alliance Conference. Otherwise, he would definitely die tragically on the spot. We admit defeat. At this time, Ran Jinchuan's figure had already risen into the air. He shouted loudly so that everyone could hear him clearly. He knew that if he were to admit defeat a moment later, it could lead to the death of another disciple. Hearing Ran Jinchuan's voice, many people let out a sigh of relief. These people were finally willing to admit defeat. When the young man killed, the pressure that he brought to the onlookers was so great that they found it difficult to breathe. From the looks of it, everything could end right here and now. Phew! The remaining disciples from the 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect felt even more relaxed. It was as if they had seen the light in the endless night. However, just when they had a glimmer of hope in their hearts, they heard a cold snort. It was like a heavy hammer hitting everyone's chest. Oomph. This cold snort was emitted from Su Yi's mouth. He seemed to have not heard Ran Jinchuan's words as he suddenly raised the long saber in his hand. Mad Dragon Overlord Slash. These words burst out from Su Yi's throat without any hesitation. He gripped the saber tightly with both hands. The surrounding void instantly spread out into a small, blazing storm, and a violent and sharp power surged out from it. Both of his arms slashed down, and a saber slashed down fiercely. Chi! In an instant, a saber light shot out like a long red thunderbolt, and an earth-shattering red aura swept out in all directions. Roar! The shadow of a crimson dragon was faintly discernible in the saber light. The violent and sharp momentum exploded with a bang, as if it could cut through the void. It directly slashed toward the remaining disciples of the 7-Star Sword School and the Gimdeo sect. Under the terrifying aura, countless people were shocked and dumbfounded. When the remaining 10 disciples of the two sects heard Ran Jinxian admit defeat, they had already stopped their attacks and stood in the arena. At this moment, facing this violent and domineering attack, all of them seemed to be in a daze. They did not make any moves to resist. "Kid, how dare you?" Ran Jinxian shouted and flew directly toward the arena, wanting to stop the saber from falling. Who dares to obstruct the Alliance Conference? At this moment, a soft snort was heard. It was like a sudden explosion of thunder, and it was earth-shattering. Ran Jinxian only felt a sense of suffocation in his chest, and his aura suddenly stagnated. The person who had spoken was obviously above him in cultivation. This was the Alliance's powerhouse who had spoken and stopped Ran Jinchuan's actions. It was also at this moment that a Chi La sound was heard. On the 10th arena, Su Yi's saber was like a dragon. It instantly attacked and swallowed the 10 disciples of the two sects. Pu piu piu. A series of muffled sounds were heard, accompanied by scarlet blood. One by one, the bodies were cut open by the saber radiance, and the smell of blood rushed into the sky. The 10 disciples of the two sects were all sent flying backward. Their broken limbs fell to the ground and covered the arena. This scene was too terrifying. It was like hell on earth. The smell of blood assailed the nostrils, and it made the young man even more ferocious. "I've already admitted defeat. Why don't you stop?" Ran Jinchuan's eyes turned red, and he could not help but shout. At the same time as he shouted at Su Yi, he was also questioning the person who had secretly stopped him from attacking. The Alliance Conference had certain rules. As long as one surrendered, the other party could not attack again. Otherwise, it would be regarded as contempt of the conference's rules. A light punishment would be disqualification, and a heavy punishment would be death on the spot. Su Yi's actions just now had obviously violated this rule. Everyone knows the rules of the conference. We've already admitted defeat, but that kid still attacked. You didn't pursue the matter, and instead, you stopped me. Today, even if I have to face the top 10 forces of the Alliance, I, Ran Jinxian, will seek justice. Ran Jinchuan's eyes were already red. He saw that among the disciples of the two sects, only 4 of them had barely survived the attack just now. Because those few people reacted quickly and took evasive action in advance, they were temporarily spared from death. But even so, each of them was now missing an arm or a leg. If they were not treated in time, they would definitely be crippled. In other words, all the disciples of the two sects who were on the arena had been wiped out. How could Ran Jianxian not be angry with such an outcome? His narrowed eyes were brimming with resentment. The Alliance must give us justice for this matter. Yang Baiquan was also on the verge of collapse, and he almost shouted this sentence. He flew to Ran Jianxuan's side, and it seemed that he was going to attack at any moment. A total of 20 young disciples, who were the most outstanding juniors of the two sects, were all killed here, and they did not even have time to stop him. This made the two of them feel as if a knife was being twisted in their hearts. Ran Jianxian, Yang Baiquan, I think the two of you are not muddle-headed, are you? At this moment, before the people of the Alliance could speak and the surrounding crowd was still in a daze, the young man on the 10th arena snorted and said, "If I remember correctly, these people who fought with me just now represented the Gimdeo sect. You, Ran Jianxian, are the sect leader of the 7-Star Sword School. Who do you think you are to criticize me?" His eyes were shining, and he looked at Ran Jianxian and Yang Baiquan as if he was looking at a retard. Suyi's confidence came from this point. If he did not have such confidence, he would not have dared to violate the rules set by the Alliance. That was no different from courting death. You. When Suyi's words reached Ran Jianxuan's ears, he suddenly felt his mind go blank. A wave of dizziness hit him, and his entire body swayed in the air. Yang Baiquan, who was next to him, was not any better. He was about to go berserk. Only at this moment did they realize where the problem was. It was really as that little bastard had said. The two of them had become muddle-headed from anger. They had actually forgotten such an important point. They had joined forces to fight, and the first place they used was the Gimdeo sect. If the 7-Star Sword School interfered, the one who broke the rules was Ran Jianxian. Thinking of this, the two sect leaders felt aggrieved, and a strong sense of humiliation surged in their hearts. There are still 4 people alive. Suddenly, Yang Baiquan, whose veins were bulging on his forehead, glanced at the 4 people who had barely survived in the arena. It was as if he had just woken up from a dream. Among the 4 disciples, 3 of them were from the Gimdeo sect. If he saved them now, they might be able to recover if they could be treated. Therefore, he had a final thought. He would save as many as he could. This time, he would not make the same mistake. As the sect leader of the Gimdeo sect, he had the right to admit defeat. We admit. However, just as Yang Baiquan opened his mouth to speak, he saw a scene that made him fly into a rage. He saw the young man in the arena move, and like a bolt of lightning, he shuttled across the arena. Immediately after, they saw that the 4 disciples from the 2 sects who were still alive had all been beheaded. They couldn't be any more dead than this. "Bastard! Little bastard, I'm going to kill you!" Yang Baiquan immediately roared. His entire being was like an angry lion. The hair on his head stood up, and his eyes were wide open. It was as if he was going to devour someone. He pounced forward and went straight for the 10th arena. The huge hatred had already clouded his rationality. Today's repeated attacks had made Yang Baiquan, the sect leader, unable to calm down. He only had one thought in his mind, and that was to kill the young man to vent his hatred. "Get down!" But soon, a palm print appeared out of thin air and suddenly landed in front of Yang Baiquan. With a rumble, even with Yang Baiquan's cultivation at the 5th level of the Origin Emperor realm, he was pushed back by the palm print. Although he was not injured, he was instantly suppressed to the point that his aura was gone. It could be seen how powerful the person who had just attacked was. This is a warning. If anyone dares to obstruct the competition again, the Alliance will immediately take action and kill them. We will not slack off. At this moment, the Origin Emperor realm middle-aged man who presided over the competition walked out again and looked coldly at Yang Baiquan and Ran Jianxian. Perhaps in terms of cultivation, the middle-aged man could not be compared to the 2 sect leaders. However, he had the backing of the 10 Major Forces Alliance. Facing 2 sect leaders of third-rate forces, he was not afraid at all. "If I don't take revenge, how can I, Ran Jianxian, establish myself in the chaos region? If I don't get rid of this kid, how can I, Ran Jianxian, face my dead son and the 10 most outstanding disciples? Ran Jianxian landed in the void, and his heart was filled with hatred and unwillingness. He had made sufficient preparations, but he still failed to kill the young man in the arena. Chapter 1039. I'll make sure this little bastard dies a horrible death. The leader of the Gimdeo sect, Yang Baikuan, walked down from mid-air and went to the remaining disciples of the Gimdeo sect. His face was so dark that it was scary. After Ran Jianxian and Yang Baikuan met up, they turned around and looked at the 10th ring at the same time. Their eyes met. Both of their faces were trembling. Then, they turned around abruptly, swung their sleeves, and left quickly with the remaining disciples. Countless people had different feelings when they saw this scene. However, they all knew that the Gimdeo sect and the 7-Star Sword School had no chance at all in this year's Alliance Conference. The 20 most outstanding disciples of the two sects had died in the ring. The two sects no longer had any chance to compete. The Bawang sect is destined to become famous in this year's Alliance Conference. In the square, someone murmured. Their words were shocking. And that young man is absolutely terrifying. He will attract more attention than the Bawang sect. The super experts in the Alliance will probably notice him. Someone else said. Looking at the figure of the young man on the ring, their eyes were filled with shock. However, until now, they still did not know the name of the young man. This is definitely a dark horse. With his own strength, he shone in the preliminaries of the Alliance Conference. I really want to know how far he can go when he competes with the younger generation of the top 10 forces in the Alliance Conference. Many people were looking forward to it. They wanted to see the young man from the Bawang sect get a spot and compete with the disciples of the top 10 forces in the end. Until now, everyone believed that he had the ability to do so. In the Alliance Conference, it was not unheard of for 20 disciples of a force to be completely wiped out. It was also not unimaginable. However, it was too shocking for 20 people to be completely wiped out by one person. The young man fought against 20 disciples of the Gimdeo sect and the 7-Star Sword School on the ring. His robe was not even stained with a trace of blood. It had to be said that the young man was too strong. He was far beyond everyone's imagination. Among the crowd, Chunshu and the Xinjian sect and the Liuhe sect were all looking at the young man on the ring in shock. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Only the people of the Bawang sect, the Merciless West, the Green Emperor, the Yin-Yang Emperor of the Dead, the Devouring Spirit Emperor, and Huang Jian were expressionless. The Alliance Conference continues. At this moment, the middle-aged man who hosted the Alliance Conference regained his senses. He could not help but say this loudly. After he finished speaking, the young man on the ring. As for himself, he found a clean piece of ground and gently sat down cross-legged, slowly adjusting his breathing. He didn't have the slightest bit of pity towards the members of the Golden Saber sect and 7-Star Sword sect. He never took the initiative to provoke others. However, when others offended him, he would not be soft-hearted. Soon, another member of the Alliance walked to the side of the 10th arena and adjusted the timer. Everyone in the square was watching this scene. They really wanted to know if there would be anyone who would dare to challenge the youth in the next 2 hours. He closed his eyes and adjusted his breath. He did not pay attention to the situation in the other 9 rings. Those battles were not attractive to him at all. Under such circumstances, time passed by slowly. Finally, 2 hours had passed without anyone noticing. During this period of time, the battles on the 1st and 9th rings had changed a few times. However, there was still no movement on the 10th ring. The Bawang sect has advanced directly. No one dares to compete with him for this spot. Many people below the ring could not calm down. They were shocked by the young man who was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed. In just 2 battles, the young man had established an image in everyone's mind that was difficult to defeat. None of the major forces were willing to gnaw on such a tough bone. This is a genius. His cultivation is profound, and his methods are terrifying. In the preliminaries of the Alliance, he has a crushing position. Out of the 10 rings, one of them should belong to him. His opponent will be in the real Alliance conference. Someone murmured and said with a flickering gaze. For absolute geniuses, it was common for them to kill people of a higher level. That young man's cultivation was even more powerful. Therefore, he was bound to crush the disciples of the major forces who participated in the preliminaries. He was not on the same level as these people. That young man could completely surpass the limit of a major realm and challenge an ordinary origin void realm expert. Perhaps only the disciples of the 3 major first-rate forces and the 7 major second-rate forces could suppress him. The 10th ring, 2 hours have passed. No one has challenged it. The Bawang sect has advanced automatically. Finally, the middle-aged Origin Emperor who presided over the Alliance Conference announced the result. The entire place was silent. No one was discussing anything. Unknowingly, they all felt that this result was expected. Hearing this announcement, He also opened his eyes slightly, but there was not much expression on his face. Subsequently, he continued to close his eyes and rest, and the Alliance Conference continued. More than half a day had passed. As the fighting and defending of the rings continued, the various major forces had already carried out over 100 battles. The 1st and 9th rings all changed owners repeatedly. There was not a single force that kept defending until the end. Many of the truly powerful forces were still waiting. They waited until the crucial moment to make their move. It's about time. Many forces have used up their chance, and their overall strength has been revealed. Those powerful forces should make their move. It's indeed time for them to make their move. Just when there were less than 2 hours left before the first day of the tournament, someone in the square said with a burning gaze, "The 20 from a Crimson Thunder Hall have all passed. Please choose the ring you wish to challenge. The 20 from the Zephyr sect have all passed. Please choose the ring you wish to challenge. The 20 from the Sunblaze sect have all passed. Please choose the ring you wish to challenge. The 20 from the Celestial Spider sect have all passed. Please choose the ring you wish to challenge." Such voices rang out again and again, all from the burly man in charge of the examination. As the light from examination stone lit up, one figure after another ascended the stage. Yi, who was resting with his eyes closed, slowly opened his eyes and looked at the crowd that had just ascended the stage. The Sunblaze sect. He heard a familiar name. It was the sect that had teamed up with Chen Chuan. However, when Yi raised his head and looked over, he discovered that there was no trace of Chun Chu and among the crowd from the Sunblaze sect. Aren't they teaming up? Why isn't he on the stage? Yi was surprised and bewildered. Just like the situation between Chun Chu and the Sunblaze sect, many forces existed. The Sunblaze sect wanted to borrow Chun Chu and's powerful strength, while Chun Chu hoped to join forces with a sufficiently powerful force. Naturally, they would have more confidence in competing. Both sides took what they needed, and it was equivalent to an extremely reasonable deal. Could it be that something has happened? He was puzzled. He no longer looked at the stage, but cast his gaze into the endless crowd below, intending to find the familiar figure of the young man. This matter made him feel a little strange. Logically speaking, the agreement between the two parties should not be like this, unless there was some unforeseen event. Not long after, Yi saw Chen Chuan in the crowd. At this moment, he was looking at a ring with a face of indignation. The people from the Sunblaze sect were fighting with another sect on the stage. Beside Chen Chu, and there were 2 other people who had similar expressions. Indeed, there's a problem. Yi raised his eyebrows, instantly understanding this point. There was no need to think too much. There must be some conflict between Chun Chu and the Sunblaze sect, resulting in the current situation. Chun Chu had said that he had 2 friends like him who had teamed up with the Sunblaze sect. Now, it seemed like it was the 2 people beside him. However, Yi did not care about this matter. He could not care less about it now. He had already obtained a spot and only needed to wait for the end of the arena competition to enter the next round of the assembly. This time, the Bawang sect should be enough to attract a lot of attention, right? Yi withdrew his thoughts. When he thought of this problem, he could not help but smile. This was the effect he wanted. From today onwards, Everyone who came to Nine-Star City would know the name of the Bawang sect. As time passed, the news would spread and the entire Chaos territory would know. This was extremely beneficial for the expansion of the Bawang sect. Sacred Mountain, Wang Chuanda, just you wait. I, Su Yi, will eventually trample on your sect and wash away the humiliation I have suffered. And that day is not too far away. Su Yi clenched his fists and narrowed his eyes, emitting a biting cold aura. His enemies were too strong. He had to quickly rise to compete with Sacred Mountain. It had been a few months since Su Yi came to the Chaos Domain. Not long after the Alliance Conference, the Sacred Mountain would also receive the news. At that time, the other party would probably make a new move. The Sunblaze sect is quite strong. In the following time, Su Yi also paid attention to the competition in the arena. One of the groups was the Sunblaze sect. From Su Yi's observation, the Sunblaze sect had a young man in his 30s who was extremely strong. He was close to the 8th level of Yuan Zhen realm. He was definitely very strong. The other 19 people's overall strength was not weak either. In the fierce attacks, their opponents were unable to withstand and were on the verge of defeat. So it's a rogue cultivator. From Su Yi's observation, the strongest person in the Sunblaze sect was dressed differently from most people. There was no doubt that he was a rogue cultivator. In addition to this person, there were 2 other rogue cultivators whose strength could not be underestimated. They were both at the 6th level of Yuan Zhen realm. Su Yi felt a little strange about this. Chapter 1040. Indeed, not long after, the 20 disciples from Sunblaze sect charged forward and swept their opponents out of the arena. The strongest rogue cultivator unleashed his full strength. Terrifying energy surged around his body and swirled around him. Whenever his opponents got close to him, they would be hit by his fist and sent flying. After a few rounds, the entire arena was cleared. Only the Sunblaze sect disciples were left on the arena. Even though this battle was not easy, their overall strength was still intact. No one was injured, and they could continue to defend the arena. Su Yi watched for a while and did not continue to pay attention to them. This was because another familiar sect was about to enter the arena. Is Xianjian's sect finally going to enter the arena? Under Su Yi's gaze, 20 people from Xianjian's sect walked out and headed towards the testing stone. These people were led by a young man. His cultivation was not ordinary. He was at level 8 Yuan Zhen realm and was strong enough. Jihano was also one of the 20 people. There were also some rogue cultivators in Xianjian's sect. Su Yi counted and there were 4 of them. In other words, Ji Tianfu had given out 4 slots to 4 rogue cultivators. These rogue cultivators are quite strong. Under Su Yi's probing, he quickly grasped the strength of the 4 rogue cultivators. Among the 4, one of them had just reached level 7 Yuan Zhen realm. 2 of them were at level 6 Yuan Zhen realm, and the 4th was at level 5 Yuan Zhen realm. Such strength was not ordinary. Even if these rogue cultivators were placed in a third-rate force, they would definitely be ranked in the top few. Lin Fan had no idea where Xianjian's sect found these rogue cultivators from. With their addition, the overall strength of Xianjian's sect had increased by a large margin. One should know that there was a huge disparity in the cultivation of the 20 people. More than half of them were below level 5 Yuan Zhen realm. This was the normal ratio of the top sections. Let's begin the testing. The middle-aged man in charge of the testing glanced at the 20 people from Xianjian's sect and said calmly. The young man in the lead stepped forward and handed the token to the man. Under his lead, the rest of the people came to the testing stone and placed their palms on it. A green light shone out. Come on, everyone. We are about to enter the arena. After Ji Hanua passed the test, he retracted his hand. She turned her head in surprise and said to the 4 rogue cultivators beside her. Because at this time, the 4 rogue cultivators did not go forward to check. Instead, they all had their hands behind their backs, as if this matter had nothing to do with them. That's right, it's time for us to go on stage. Let's hurry up and get tested. The leader of the group from Xianjian's sect said to the 4 of them. However, their words caused the 4 rogue cultivators to laugh strangely. What happened? Sweeping his gaze across the faces of the 4 people, The young man in the lead seemed to have felt that something was wrong. He immediately frowned and asked in a deep voice. The four rogue cultivators had strange expressions on their faces, as if they had gone mad. They were sneering to themselves. "Hurry up and go on stage. Don't dawdle here." The burly man in charge of the test was also getting impatient as he shouted at the four of them. "Master, we are not here to represent Xianjian faction." Suddenly, a rogue cultivator walked out and cupped his fists at the burly man. The other three nodded in agreement. As soon as this was said, everyone from Xianjian faction was shocked. "Ma Guangfeng, what did you say?" The leader of the group immediately rushed forward and stared at the four rogue cultivators in disbelief. "You Wen Xuan, you didn't hear wrongly. We are not here to represent Xianjian faction." The rogue cultivator named Ma Guangfeng smiled faintly and said to the leader of Xianjian faction, "Ma Guangfeng, Jie Xiaoyang, Qi Tsongguang, Dong Qingzhou, what is the meaning of this?" Ji Hanua's pretty face turned ugly as she shouted at the four of them angrily. Facing such a question, the four rogue cultivators placed their hands behind their backs and sneered at Ji Hanua. Other than the disdain in their eyes, there was also a hint of wretchedness. What is going on? Soon, Ji Tianfu also realized that something was wrong. He came closer and asked the crowd. Subconsciously, he also realized that there might be a major change in the situation. Therefore, Ji Tianfu's aura was released and locked onto the four rogue cultivators. "Sect leader Ji, what is the meaning of this? We are not willing to fight for Xianjian faction. Are you going to force us?" Ma Guangfeng looked at Ji Tianfu. Under the powerful aura, his face was covered in cold sweat. However, he still spoke with a stern expression as if he was not afraid of this Origin Emperor. "We said that we would work together. Why are you going back on your words?" Ji Tianfu's eyes swept across the four of them, causing them to be shocked. The four rogue cultivators' faces were almost purple. However, they were still stubborn and had no intention of giving in. "Ji Tianfu, aren't you going overboard? These people are close to my Green Sanctuary sect. If you want to bully them, have you asked my Green Sanctuary sect permission?" At this moment, a cold snort was heard from behind Ji Tianfu. He turned around and saw a group of people walking towards him. The leader of the group was a middle-aged man in his 50s. He had a mustache on his lips, and one side of his mouth was curled up. He was looking at Ji Tianfu with a cold smile. Beside the middle-aged man was a young man in his late 20s. His eyes were wide open, and he looked at everyone as if he was looking at a joke. He was indescribably arrogant. Behind the two of them were a few middle-aged experts. Most of them were from the younger generation. "Jiang Zikan, so it's your Green Sanctuary sect's doing?" Ji Tianfu pointed at the middle-aged man and said angrily. At this point, how could he still not understand that he had been set up by someone else? In the preliminary selection of the alliance meet, each force would have 20 spots. Xianjian faction had recruited 4 powerful rogue cultivators, and they had thought that they had a high chance of getting a spot. Who would have thought that the other party would go back on their words just before they went up on the stage? As such, Ji Tianfu was in a difficult position. If he went up on the stage, he would not be able to compete with the others without 4 experts. Even if he won once or twice, he would not be able to last till the end. However, if he did not go up on the stage, this opportunity would be wasted. If that was all, it would be fine. However, the thing that frustrated Ji Tianfu the most was that where was he going to find 4 suitable candidates to replace them? Are you guys from Xianjian faction going up on the stage or not? If you guys don't go up on the stage, it will be taken as a forfeit. Suddenly, the middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment said. His voice was buzzing with dissatisfaction. "Good. Very good." Ji Tianfu's face was extremely gloomy. He stared at Jiang Zikan from the Green Sanctuary sect and Ma Guangfeng and the other rogue cultivators. "We don't want to compete anymore. Let's go." In the end, Ji Tianfu waved his hand decisively and said to all the disciples of Xianjian faction, "Faction leader, father." The young man from Xianjian faction, Ji Hanua, and the rest of the disciples stepped forward and looked at Ji Tianfu. "Let's go." Ji Tianfu shouted again. His attitude did not allow anyone to question him. All the disciples kept quiet and did not dare to question him anymore. Looking at the disciples of Xianjian faction walking back in a crowd, Jiang Zikin from the Green Sanctuary sect, the young man beside him, and the 4 rogue cultivators laughed coldly again. Ji Tianfu, at least you know what's good for you. If not, I will make sure that none of your disciples will be able to walk out of the arena alive. Jiang Zikin's mustache curled up. His eyes were shining and his words were cold. Jiang Su, go with them for the assessment. It's time for us to make our move. Jiang Zikin turned around and said to the arrogant young man beside him. He then raised his head and gestured for him to go up on the stage. The arrogant young man nodded his head. He then led the disciples of Green Sanctuary sect to the assessment stone and started the assessment. The 4 rogue cultivators who were called Ma Guangfeng, Jie Xiaoyang, Qi Rinxian, and Dong Qingzhou also joined the disciples of Green Sanctuary sect. They made up a total of 20 people and passed the assessment. Immediately, they went up on the stage and chose a champion to challenge. Father, when did the Green Sanctuary sect make their move? Ji Han'o, who was in the crowd, frowned and asked the tall man beside her. I'm afraid they have planned this from the start. They purposely let the 4 of them come in contact with Xianjian sect. At the last moment, they betrayed us so that we would lose the right to compete. Ji Tianfu's face was still ghastly. He said flatly, this time, I have made a mistake. I can't believe that the Green Sanctuary sect set me up. He clenched his fist and punched the air. He was extremely angry. The alliance meeting was held once every 50 years. Before they could even go up on the stage to challenge, they had already lost the right to participate. This was a huge blow to their morale. Most importantly, the day's competition was coming to an end. In just one night, where could he find the 4 suitable people to fill the gap? Green Sanctuary sect. We will remember this. The young man beside Ji Tianfu, who was called Yu Wenshuan, gritted his teeth and said, the Green Sanctuary sect and Xianjian sect had always been enemies. A few months ago, the Green Sanctuary sect had instructed the Sea Dragon Gang to kidnap Ji Han'o to threaten Ji Tianfu. However, when the plan was about to succeed, it was ruined by Su Yi. After that, Ji Tianfu had tried to take revenge on the Green Sanctuary sect. However, as the alliance meeting was approaching, he did not make any big moves. The overall strength of the 2 forces was not too different. Therefore, Ji Tianfu was a little worried. If he were to attack recklessly, there might be some unexpected consequences. What he did not expect was that the Green Sanctuary sect would set up a trap during the alliance meeting. This was something that no one in Xianjian sect had expected. It's our fault that Xianjian sect is not strong enough. If not, we would not have suffered such a loss. Ji Tianfu mumbled to himself with a ghastly expression. He shifted his gaze and looked at the 10th arena. He saw the young man sitting on it with his legs crossed. If he agrees to join forces with Xianjian sect. Chapter 1041. If it was before, Ji Tianfu would have thought that such a thought was not so far-fetched. Although Su Yi was strong, Xianjian sect was not weak either. If they were to work together, they could only be considered as a strong team. However, things were different now. Su Yi's youth had completely subverted Ji Tianfu's imagination. With his own strength, he was able to obtain the right to participate in the competition, and no one dared to challenge him. Compared to him, the young disciples of Xianjian sect were instantly overshadowed. At this stage, if the 2 parties were to work together again, Xianjian sect would have to rely on Su Yi. Father, don't think too much. We still have one more chance to challenge him. Looking at his father's gloomy face, Ji Han'o did not ask any more questions. Instead, she comforted him. We will fight again tomorrow. Despite his reluctance, Ji Tianfu still said so. There was still one more night for him to work. Perhaps he could get to know some decent rogue cultivators to fill the gap between the 4 of them. However, if there were no suitable candidates, he could only brace himself and let the other disciples join in. Let's go. After taking one last look at the Green Sanctuary sect that was fighting fiercely in the arena, Jian Fu waved his hand and led all the disciples away from the square. Soon, they disappeared. It seems like even though private fights are not allowed in Nine-Star City, there are still all kinds of ways to fight. Su Yi had seen everything that happened between Xinjian sect and Green Sanctuary sect. First, there were some unforeseen events that happened between Chun Chu and Sunblaze sect. This had already caught Su Yi's attention. Now, Xinjian sect was also made a fool of. One could see that the competition had just ended and the undercurrent was surging fiercely. Among the many forces that Su Yi did not know, similar situations would not be rare. May I ask if I can walk down from the arena? Su Yi suddenly looked down from the arena and asked the middle-aged Origin Emperor that was hosting the competition. After the previous two battles, Su Yi did not expend much of his energy. After he had adjusted his breathing, he had adjusted his body's condition to the absolute peak. Since he had already obtained one of the final spots, it seemed like there was no need for him to continue staying on the arena. The Bawang sect has already obtained a spot, so this arena belongs to you. Therefore, you don't have to stay on it. The middle-aged man thought for a moment before he nodded and said, a similar situation had never occurred in the past alliance conferences. How could anyone win a spot on the first day? Most of the time, the outcome would only be decided on the second day. That's great. Su Yi smiled and then flew down into the crowd in the middle of the square. What a young man. He's really extraordinary. If he's a little older, he won't need to be much older. He'll only need to be 3 to 5 years old, and he'll probably be able to compete with the strongest people in the first-rate forces. That's for sure. This young man is simply a monster. Su Yi's figure fell into the eyes of many onlookers, causing them to exclaim in surprise once again. At this moment, everyone had already regarded him as one of the strongest people in a first-rate force. It was a pity that this young man was still young. If he were a few years older, he would only be in his early 20s. He would definitely be able to compete with the best people in their 30s. Sect leader, shall we go back to the inn? Su Yi, Merciless West, Green Emperor, Yin-Yang Ghost Emperor, Devouring Spirit Emperor, and Huang Jian gathered together. Huang Jian immediately asked him, there's nothing to see here. Let's go back. We'll come back tomorrow. Su Yi nodded and said softly. After he finished speaking, he led them through the crowd and walked in a certain direction. Everyone was shocked by this young man's dazzling performance on the arena. As he walked, the crowd directly parted to make a path for him. At the other end of the path was Chun Chu and 2 other rogue cultivators. Brother Su Yi. Seeing Su Yi walking towards him, Chun Chu immediately smiled and was very happy. Although he could not go on the arena with the Sunblaze sect, Chun Chu was still happy for Su Yi. Chun Chu was able to obtain the qualification for the competition quickly. In addition to his amazing strength, Chun Chu felt that it was a great achievement to be able to call Su Yi brother. Brother Chun, what's the matter with you? Su Yi did not dawdle. He directly motioned to the people from the Sunblaze sect who were guarding the arena and asked Chun Chu. Hearing this, Chun Chu's originally happy expression was overshadowed by gloom. His face was livid, but he did not immediately answer Su Yi. Seeing this, Su Yi did not delve into it. He immediately asked again, Brother Chun, do you have anything else to do here? Why don't you come with me? Okay. This time, Chun Chu nodded his head and agreed without hesitation. He and Su Yi had been traveling together for a long time. They were already very familiar with each other. There was no pretense at all. As for the Green Emperor, Yin-Yang Ghost Emperor, Devouring Spirit Emperor, and Huang Jian, Chun Chu also knew them. However, he looked more at Merciless West, because Chun Chu had not seen this old man along the way. Chun Chu actually knows this young man from the Bawang sect. Looking at Chun Chu, who was walking side by side with Su Yi, his 2 friends were stunned. They rubbed their eyes and could not believe it. Chun Chu was just a rogue cultivator. He did not have a strong background. How could he know such a person? Shen Hong, Yi Haokong, what are you 2 doing? Why don't you go? In an instant, Chen, who had already walked a distance, stopped. He turned around and shouted at his 2 friends who were still in a daze. The two rogue cultivators were stunned and did not know what to say. Let's go with Chin Chuan. One of the rogue cultivators reacted quickly. He pulled up his companion and quickly caught up with Chin Chuan. The other person stood beside Su Yi, feeling a little uneasy. Inside his heart, he could not help but feel that something was amiss. The group of people walked quickly. Before long, they left the square and disappeared. Have you found out the background of that young man? In the stands near the arena, one of the experts of the Alliance asked the person next to him. Not yet. It's just some recent activities. He does have a deep grudge with the Gimdeo sect and the 7-Star Sword School, which is why the two sects did not hesitate to kill him. An expert spoke, stating this result. This young man seems to have appeared out of thin air. Before he became enemies with the Gimdeo sect, there seemed to be no trace of him in the Chaos region. Another person added, such a young man can't be a nobody. Since he has just emerged in the Chaos region, it is most likely that he came from the 6 continents, the 3 continents, and the 1 sea. These places are more powerful than the Chaos region. It's understandable that there is a talented young man, but we must figure out his background. If he is sent by the top 10 forces and has other intentions in the Chaos region, we still have to be careful. An old man took over the conversation and said word by word. Almost a day had passed, and they had only found out so little, which made them feel a little helpless. According to what they knew now, they only knew that the young man was from the Bawang sect. They did not even know his real name. Perhaps this Bawang sect was still a non-existent thing. It was really difficult to find out. Don't worry, his identity won't be hidden for long. Since he dares to be so high profile, the possibility of him being a spy from the 6 continents, the 3 continents, and the 1 sea is almost zero. Another expert said. After he finished speaking, he suddenly frowned, as if he was trying hard to recall something. He said strangely, but I keep feeling that I have heard the name Bawang sect somewhere before, but I can't remember it. It's really strange. You might have remembered it wrongly, right? Someone next to him raised his eyebrows and said lightly. They did not delve too deeply into this question and continued to watch the battles in the arena. In this Alliance Conference's preliminary selection, they wanted to select some extraordinary disciples from the outstanding young people so that they could receive better training and increase the strength of each force. Of course, within the top 10 forces, they had their own selection rules regarding the candidates that they could select. Other than that, the most important thing was that those outstanding youths would be able to survive after the end of the arena competition. The arena battles continued, and the various forces fought. After a day, almost all the forces that were supposed to fight had already done so. Except for the 10th arena that Su Yi had already occupied, the remaining 9 arenas had changed owners more than once. Today's competition was about to come to an end. As the sky became darker and darker, no one was prepared to go up to challenge. When the sky was about to turn dark, several figures gathered in the main hall of the mansion in the northern part of 9-Star City, and they sat separately. This mansion was not considered luxurious in 9-Star City, but it was imposing enough to show a certain level of identity and status. At this time, the main hall was already filled with flickering lights emitting a clear light. In the main seat of the main hall, a middle-aged man was sitting. His face was pale, and his body was surging with hostility. Although he was trying hard to restrain himself, his behavior still made an old man in his 60s frown. Elder Wu, you must help me. My Gimdeo sect has suffered a great loss this time, and I can't take this lying down no matter what. The middle-aged man sitting below was the sect leader of the Gimdeo sect, Yang Baikuan. He was like an aggrieved child, full of sadness and annoyance in front of the old man. His only son had died tragically, and his 10 strongest disciples were quickly killed. Such a great hatred was unbearable for him. What was more, the Gimdeo sect had completely lost the opportunity to participate in this alliance conference. Don't be so anxious. The old man in the main seat said slowly to Yang Baikuan, he's only a 17-year-old boy, but he made you, the sect leader, so impatient. This won't do. Chapter 1042. Your father once saved the life of the young sect master. In addition, The Gimdeo sect is also considered a branch of the Tiangang sect. Naturally, I will help you with this matter. Elder Wu looked at Yang Baikuan and said slowly, however, don't be too anxious about this matter. Didn't you say that the boy from the Bawang sect had already obtained a spot in the grand meeting? As long as he continues to participate in the grand meeting, won't we still have a good chance of killing him? Elder Wu did not care about the boy who had killed the Bawang sect at all. He did not think that the boy was a very powerful young cultivator at all. However, I don't want to see that little bastard alive for even a day. Every moment he jumps around, my heart can't be at peace. Yang Baikuan was extremely furious as he said this. His hatred for Su Yi had reached an extreme point. Naturally, it was difficult for outsiders to understand. When Elder Wu saw this, a look of disgust flashed across his eyes. He scoffed softly and said, he has already obtained a spot. It's no longer possible to kill him in the arena. Furthermore, this is 9-star city. If you don't want to die, restrain yourself a little. Otherwise, if the 3 great forces attack in anger, don't drag me and the Tiangang sect into it. These words were harsh enough, but Yang Baikuan was still unwilling to give up. He quickly said, but no buts. Elder Wu cut him off and chided, go back and calm down first. Don't let your hatred get to your head. I've promised to avenge you, so I won't go back on my word. Isn't he just a little bastard? As long as he dares to step into the secret place, I'll make sure that he won't be able to walk out alive. As he spoke, Elder Wu's entire body emitted a strong, murderous aura. Yes, Elder Wu, I'll take my leave first. Under Elder Wu's reprimand, Yang Baikuan finally stopped his insolence. He suppressed the restlessness in his heart and walked out of the grand hall. He walked through the corridors and stairs. When Yang Baikuan was about to walk out of the mansion, Ran Jianxian, who had been waiting here, quickly went up to him. How is it? Ran Jianxian asked Yang Baikuan impatiently. Their 2 great sects could be said to be in the same boat. Yang Baikuan and Ran Jianxian both suffered the pain of losing their children. It was also because of this that the 2 of them had come together and were bent on killing that young man. Ran Jianxian had always known that the Gimdeo sect's strongest person, Yang Yi, who was also Yang Baikuan's father, seemed to have an unusual relationship with him. However, no one knew the details. Only until today did he find out that behind Yang Yi, there was actually the existence of a second-rate power like the Heavenly Dipper sect. It was no wonder that the Golden Saber sect was able to rise up in such a short time. The Heavenly Dipper sect must have provided a lot of support. It was because of this relationship that Yang Baikuan wanted to use it to kill the young man from the Overlord sect. Elder Wu has already agreed. However, we can't fight him in the arena. We can only let the young experts of the Big Dipper sect deal with him in the secret place. Yang Baikuan said to Ran Jianxian softly with an unsightly expression. 1. As long as I can kill that boy, no matter what the Tiangang sect wants, I won't hesitate as long as I can do it. Ran Jianxian gritted his teeth and said bitterly, if the boy from the Bawang sect didn't die, he would always be Ran Jianxuan's sore point and would never be healed. We'll talk about this later. You can't reveal the relationship between the Gimdeo sect and the Tiangang sect. Yang Baikuan turned his head and glanced in the direction of the Great Hall just now as he said. After that, the 2 of them didn't stay any longer and left the mansion. With the promise of the Tiangang sect's Elder Wu, the 2 of them knew what to do. Although Yang Baikuan couldn't wait to kill the boy immediately, he wasn't impulsive. He gritted his teeth and restrained himself. In the room of the inn, Su Yi, Merciless West, and Green Emperor were all there. Chen Chu and his 2 rogue cultivator friends were also there. After Chen Chu N's introduction, everyone knew that the 2 of them were called Shun Hong and Yi Haokong. Shun Hong was tall and strong, with a powerful aura. His cultivation was at the peak of the 6th level of Yuan Zhen realm, slightly stronger than Chen Chuan. Yi Haokong was of medium build, not as delicate as Chen Chuan. His eyes were bright and full of spirit, with a sense of shrewdness. His cultivation was slightly lower than Chen Chuan's, so it was hard to say how strong he was. Hello, Brother Su. Shun Hong and Yi Haokong followed Chen Chu into the place where Su Yi was staying. They still couldn't believe it. They didn't dare to call Su Yi's name like Chen Chuan because the boy's strength far exceeded theirs. It's a little crowded here. Let's make do. Su Yi greeted them and found himself a stool to sit down. Then he asked Chen Chuan, "Are you guys in some kind of trouble?" When he saw the faces of Chen Chuan and the others, he roughly guessed the situation, but he couldn't be sure. They might have been suddenly abandoned by the Sunblaze sect. To tell you the truth, Brother Su Yi, I don't blame the Sunblaze sect for going back on their word. I just hate that I'm not strong enough, weaker than Tang Tianxing, Shi Rongchang, and Du Zhao. Chen Chuan laughed bitterly and shook his head. Shun Hong and Yi Haokong unconsciously clenched their fists when they heard this, but the three of them didn't have the same indignation as they did earlier. In fact, only Tang Tianxing is stronger than the three of us. He's already at the peak of the 7th level of Yuanjun realm and is about to reach the 8th level. Shi Rongchang and Du Zhao are slightly weaker than us. However, the Sunblaze sect has taken a fancy to Tang Tianxing. They originally wanted to take the spots of their weaker disciples to recruit Tang Tianxing. However, Tang Tianxing has some grudges with the three of us. Therefore, he requested that the three of us must withdraw at the same time before he is willing to cooperate with the Sunblaze sect. Shenhong opened his mouth and explained. Su Yi nodded slightly when he heard this. He could roughly guess the situation. Now that he heard it from these people, everything was clear. It seemed that the strongest rogue cultivator in the Sunblaze sect was the Tang Tianxing that Shun Hong had mentioned. The young rogue cultivator was indeed strong. In terms of talent, he was not inferior to young Master Wang from the Green Sanctuary sect who had died at the hands of Su Yi. Moreover, Tang Tianxing was stronger than young Master Wang in terms of age. However, Su Yi didn't care about such strength at all. If that's the case, why don't I recommend you to the Xinjian sect? What do you think? Su Yi thought for a while and felt that this was really a coincidence. The Xinjian sect was set up by the Green Sanctuary sect and 4 rogue cultivators, while Chun Chu and was set up by the other rogue cultivators and was abandoned by the Sunblaze sect. In this case, wouldn't the two of them hit it off? Brother Su Yi, do you know anyone from the Xinjian sect? That's great. Chen Chu and was overjoyed and said. They had seen what had happened to the Xinjian sect. However, Chun Chuan and the rest were still angry and didn't think of looking for the Xinjian sect. Later on, Ji Tianfu left with his disciples, and they lost track of them. How could they find them in such a big 9-star city? Now, with Su Yi's words, things were even more different. If he was familiar with the Xinjian sect, the two sides would trust each other more. This was indeed a good idea. Brother Su, if you can help us, we'll be very grateful. Shun Hong and Yi Haokong quickly thanked Su Yi, and they were even more respectful of him. The Alliance Conference was a grand occasion for the young geniuses. Everyone wanted to make it to the end. Later on, they had lost the opportunity to compete, and they couldn't help but feel depressed. However, now that the opportunity had appeared in front of them again, how could they not be surprised? This is not a big deal. Moreover, I think Sect Leader Ji will do me this favor. Su Yi waved his hand and didn't make full promises. Then, he said to the three of them, "However, I also have something to talk to you about." Brother Su Yi, what is it? Just say it. Chen Chu and was slightly surprised. After such a long time of contact, Su Yi rarely spoke to him in such a formal manner. However, he also knew that since Su Yi said that he wanted to talk, he would definitely not cheat them. If the three of you are interested, as the sect leader of the Bawang sect, I would like to invite you to join the Bawang sect. Perhaps the three of you still have doubts about the 3 words Overlord sect, but I can't say much about it. I can only promise the three of you one thing, and that is, if the three of you agree, I can give you great benefits. Su Yi looked at the three of them and said, This, Chen Shun Hong, and Yi Haokong looked at each other and found it difficult to make a decision for a while. They were all rogue cultivators with extraordinary talent. If they were willing, a large number of third-rate forces, or even second-rate forces, would fight over them. However, they didn't choose to do so. There must be their own reasons for this. Now Su Yi suddenly invited them, which really made the three of them feel embarrassed. You don't have to answer me in a hurry. It doesn't matter if you refuse. I, Su Yi, can make friends with you. Su Yi smiled faintly and said casually. What he valued was the potential of these people. Besides, the Bawang sect was really short of people now. He had some understanding of Chun Chu and along the way. He knew that this young man had a good character and could be trusted. He thought that Shun Hong and Yi Haokong were similar. Hence, Su Yi did have the intention to appease them. However, Su Yi would not force them to do so. Everyone had their own ambitions. Perhaps they had some hidden troubles that they could not talk about. Brother Su Yi, please let us think about it. In addition, even if we can't join the Bawang sect, we will definitely tell you the reason. Chen Chuan thought about it and said seriously. Chapter 1043. For Chen Chuan, Shun Hong, and Yi Haokong, they were individual cultivators. If they wanted to join a sect, they could have done so a long time ago. However, that was not the case. Generally, rogue cultivators were extremely poor. However, to some extent, being a rogue cultivator also had its benefits. Otherwise, an Origin Emperor realm expert like Merciless West, who is also a soul controller, will be treated as a distinguished guest no matter which sect she joined. Okay, you can tell me the result at any time. Su Yi nodded. He did not intend to force the three of them to do anything. However, he was looking forward to them joining his sect. With his mysterious space and the spiritual liquid treasure, the three of them would definitely be able to reach a higher realm in a short time. Thank you, Brother Su Yi, Chen Chuan replied. However, he had a strange feeling in his heart. It was not until now that they knew that Su Yi was the leader of the Bawang sect. However, according to the rumors in the square today, it seemed that there were still several powerful Emperor realm experts in the Bawang sect. Otherwise, how could they create such a huge commotion between the 7-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect? Is handsome Su not back yet? Su Yi nodded and turned to look at the door. He should be back soon. However, 9 stars is quite big. It will take some time to find the people from the Xinjian sect and return here, Merciless West replied. Previously, when the people from the Xinjian sect left in anger, Su Yi, who was in the arena, signaled Merciless West to follow him. Handsome Su, who was sleeping soundly, was immediately energized when he heard that there was something to do. He ignored Merciless West and flew away on his own. Looking at the time, it was about time for him to return. Just as everyone was thinking about this, the door was pushed open and a bird flew in. It was Handsome Su. Boss. Handsome Su landed on Su Yi's shoulder. CB knew XO fastest S up, 0 MIA as soon as he opened his mouth to speak. Shun Hong and Yi Haokong in the room were directly frightened. Demon void stage? The two itinerant cultivators were shocked. Such an ordinary-looking bird was actually a demon void realm cultivator? Handsome Su only glanced at them indifferently and ignored them. At this moment, several figures followed him in from outside the door. The person in the lead was tall and well-built with an elegant aura. He was the master of Xinjian faction, Ji Tianfu. Behind him, Ji Hanhua and Yu Wenxuan walked in together. Little brother, Su-Yi. Ji Tianfu and Ji Hanhua smiled at Su-Yi. I was just about to look for you, but I didn't expect Sect Master Ji to come here directly. Su-Yi returned the greeting with a smile. This indeed surprised him. Haha, I don't have anything else to do. I'm just here to congratulate little brother Su-Yi for successfully obtaining the right to participate in the competition. Ji Tianfu said sincerely, but there was a complicated look in his eyes. Ji Hanhua, who was behind him, was the same. While she was happy for Su-Yi, she was still angry about the situation that her faction encountered. Thank you, Sect Master Ji and Miss Hanhua. Su-Yi nodded at the young man behind Ji Tianfu as a form of greeting. Then, Su-Yi did not beat around the bush and directly introduced Chen Chu, Shun Hong, and Yi Haokong to Ji Tianfu. This was Su-Yi's main purpose. If it were any other day, he might not care about these things. But today, Xinjian faction was set up by Qingming faction, and Chen Chu and the other two were also set up by others. Su-Yi was familiar with both parties and had a good relationship with them. Therefore, he was happy to be the middleman and build bridges for them. Soon, Ji Tianfu, Chun Chu, and the other two had a pleasant conversation. In a short while, they had finalized the decision to cooperate with each other. Tomorrow, Xianjin faction had another chance to compete on the stage. With Chun Chu and the other two joining, their overall strength had greatly increased. Ji Tianfu, Chun Chu, and the rest expressed their gratitude to Su Yi. Then, both parties did not stay any longer and left. The moment before she walked out of the door, Ji Hanua turned around and looked at Su Yi deeply. Su Yi, however, grinned and smiled at her gently. This made Ji Hanua lower her head slightly. Then, she stepped out of the door and disappeared. It seems that this little girl is interested in you. Seeing that the group of people had disappeared, Merciless West, who had seen everything, said with a smile. He glanced at Su Yi, who was beside him, and saw that this kid looked embarrassed. Of course not. Su Yi rolled his eyes at Merciless West and walked back into the house. Ji Hanua had helped him several times. The first time was when he killed the 4 protectors of the Gimdeo sect. She saw it with her own eyes, but she hid it. The second time was when the Gimdeo sect and the 7-star sword school were chasing Su Yi. It was Ji Tianfu who suddenly appeared and took Su Yi away, which made it easier for him to escape. According to Ji Tianfu, it was Ji Hanua who begged Ji Tianfu to do this. It could be seen that the girl had deep feelings for Su Yi. In fact, he didn't have any bad feelings for Ji Hanua, but it was a bit too fake to talk about how much he liked her. This kind of thing was better to let nature take its course. Everything depended on fate. Su Yi suddenly remembered that when Su Yi applied medicine to heal the girl in the cave on the island, the charming scene flashed in his mind. Su Yi, a true virgin who had lived 2 lives, couldn't help but feel restless. Beast! Su Yi secretly scolded himself for being shameless. He was such a great and upright person. How could he think about this kind of thing? He was simply too shameless. Kid, did you experience something that I don't know about? Seeing Su Yi's expression change, Merciless West teased from his side. He, not only Merciless West, but Su Xiaoshui, the Green Emperor, the Yin-Yang Emperor of the Underworld, Huang Jian, and the Devouring Spirit Emperor were also laughing. Each of them looked at Su Yi with an unfathomable gaze, as if they had seen through something. No, Su Yi glared at them angrily. He no longer paid attention to these people and began to think about some problems. Kid, if you want to do a favor to the Xinjiang sect and those rogue cultivators, why don't you just give them the Bawang sect's quota? Especially those 3 rogue cultivators. Perhaps they might even join the Overlord sect for the sake of these 3 spots in the grand meeting. Suddenly, Merciless West walked to Su Yi's side, took a sip of wine, and then said, the Overlord sect had already successfully obtained a spot for the grand meeting. However, Su Yi was the only one who could take the spot. They could easily give the remaining 19 spots to other people. Is that okay? Su Yi was stunned and looked at Merciless West and asked. He thought that if he was the only one participating in the challenge tournament, it meant that the Bawang sect only had 1 quota. But from what his big brother said, it didn't seem to be the case. Every sect has 20 quotas. The Alliance will only ask which sects have obtained the quota. They don't care who you send to participate in the next round. Some sects have defended in the challenge tournament and obtained the quota, but in the end, someone died. In the end, they will let others take the quota and participate in the next round. So, the Bawang sect still has 19 quotas, which can be used as a favor. Merciless West thought for a while and explained to Su Yi, you can do that. Su Yi was a little surprised, but then a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. I'm rich, I'm rich. Su Yi smiled like a blooming flower, rubbing his hands and licking his lips. His eyes shone with a bright green light, as if he was a hungry wolf that had seen its prey. He chuckled and said, we're going to hit the jackpot this time. Everyone in the room was stunned by his expression. They had no idea what was going on. Boss, did you take the wrong medicine? Handsome Su immediately jumped off Su Yi's shoulder, wanting to get as far away from this lunatic as possible. Merciless West also looked at Sue E with concern for an idiot. She had no idea what this guy was thinking. Sue E seemed to feel that there was something wrong with his image. He smiled and put away his excited expression. He asked the people around him, "Our Bawang sect still has 19 quotas. What price do you think would be suitable if I were to sell these quotas?" "What the F***CK? You can do that?" This time, it was Merciless West's turn to be shocked. They really couldn't understand Su Yi's brain circuit. Why would he think of selling the quotas? However, after thinking about it, this method was not impossible. Many forces came to participate in the Alliance Conference in order to pass the preliminaries and get one of the 10 quotas. However, it was really too difficult. Most forces would be eliminated. If the Bawang sect suddenly took out 19 quotas to sell, there would definitely be a lot of people who would break their heads to get them. As long as the price was reasonable, there was no need to worry about making a fortune. How about 100,000 2-star origin stones for one quota? Is this price reasonable? Su Yi's face was full of excitement. He couldn't hide the excitement in his heart. It seems a little too greedy. The 7-star sword school only offered a reward of 200,000 2-star origin stones for me. Even an ordinary third-rate sect wouldn't be willing to exchange 100,000 2-star origin stones for one quota. He started to count with his fingers. He was thinking about how to set a reasonable price. 20,000 2-star origin stones will do. Any less, and I would be at a loss. He muttered to himself. He felt that 20,000 2-star origin stones for one quota should be something that others could accept. It wasn't a loss for him. This guy only has money in his eyes. Merciless West and the others were helpless. Looking at Su Yi's serious face, they only felt that this sect leader was a complete money grubber. Especially Merciless West. This guy's character was simply too fickle. Chapter 1044. One slot costs 22 2-star vitality stones. If all 19 slots are sold, that would be 380,000 2-star vitality stones, which is equivalent to 38 million 1-star vitality stones. That's quite a sum of money. He kept mumbling to himself, his eyes twinkling like stars. How could he not be excited at the thought of such a sizable sum of money? Merciless West, Little Handsome Su, the Green Emperor, and the Yin-Yang Underworld Emperor ignored Su Yi and went to cultivate. He did not waste too much time. 38 million 1-star vitality stones was indeed a windfall for him, but he had to get it first. Besides, he owed the Spirit Treasures Pavilion 1 billion vitality stones. Compared to that, this amount of money was nothing. It was a quiet night. On the second day, Su Yi and the others went to the square in the afternoon to watch the final battle. When they appeared, the square was in an uproar. The young man from the Bawang sect represented absolute power. Even if he was alone, he was far more powerful than the combined strength of 20 disciples from other sections. He had advanced early and obtained one of the 10 qualifications. Such a legendary figure was talked about enthusiastically by everyone. The Green Sanctuary sect is quite strong. They have been defending until now. Su Yi glanced at the arena and found that the people from the Green Sanctuary sect were still on it. Other than the 4 extraordinary rogue cultivators, the arrogant young man was the strongest. He was definitely at the 8th level of Yuan Zhen stage. After asking around a little, Su Yi and the others found out that the Green Sanctuary sect had set up an arena yesterday evening and had been guarding it until now. Moreover, they had preserved their battle strength, and there were not many people who dared to challenge them. In the Sunblaze sect, they seemed to be quite lucky. Su Yi looked around and saw another arena. The people from the Sunblaze sect were still on it. However, compared to the Green Sanctuary sect, they were a little more miserable. More than half of them were injured, and some of them were quite serious. It could be said that their battle strength was greatly affected. One had to admit that the Green Sanctuary sect and the rogue cultivators were very powerful. Otherwise, they would not have been able to defend until now. This is the second chance for the Sunblaze sect. They were defeated in the morning. However, after resting for a while, they chased the people who defeated them out of the arena again. Su Yi heard this news after asking some of the spectators around him. However, looking at the current state of the Sunblaze sect, it might not be easy for them to continue defending until the end. However, this matter was hard to say. After all, those who could fight had already fought. Those who had fought had either suffered some losses or injuries. Suddenly, just as Sui was thinking about it, a few familiar figures walked to the examination table, handed over their tokens, and stepped into the ring. The Sunblaze sect, the Sunblaze sect, the Sunblaze sect. Xianjian sect has chosen the Sunblaze sect. I guess they can avenge Chun Chuan and the other rogue cultivators? Merciless West, who was next to Sui, raised her eyebrows and said. Sui heard and nodded slightly. Under their gaze, the 17 disciples of the Xianjian sect, Chen Chu, Shan Hong, and Yi Haokong stood in front of the 20 people from the Sunblaze sect. When they saw Chen Chu and the other two, Tang Tianxing, Shi Rongchong, and Du Zhao from the Sunblaze sect were clearly stunned. I didn't expect the three of you to find another sect. You're in luck. Tang Tianxing was a young man with a protruding mouth and an ape-like chin. His entire face carried a sinister aura, which made people feel uncomfortable. He faced Chen Chu, Shan Hong, and Yi Haokong and spoke coldly. However, Chen Chu and the rest ignored him. After exchanging glances with Yu Wenshuan, Ji Hanhua, and the rest of the Xianjian sect, they immediately attacked. Rays of sword light shot out from the young experts. It was like a rain of light that swept fiercely towards the Sunblaze sect. When the Xianjian sect attacked without saying a word, the faces of the Sunblaze sect disciples turned pale. As the battle continued, their expressions became more and more gloomy. This was because the Xianjian sect strength was too strong. Overall, they were slightly stronger than the Sunblaze sect. Most importantly, they had not participated in any of the battles since the day before. They were simply waiting for the exhausted Xianjian sect to attack with their full strength. Soon, they gained the upper hand. The Xianjian sect only had one chance left. Hence, they attacked even more fiercely, trying to chase the Sunblaze sect out of the arena at the lowest cost. The Sunblaze sect went back on their words. They asked for it this time. Sui muttered as he watched the battle. He knew that the Xianjian sect might have done this to give him face, or that they might have valued Chen Chu and the rest, and wanted to befriend them. Hence, they chose to attack the Sunblaze sect as soon as the battle started. The outcome will be decided soon. The Xianjian sect should be defending the arena. Huang Jian added. Indeed, it did not take long for the Sunblaze sect to admit defeat under the powerful attacks of the Xianjian sect. They had already lost a lot of combat strength. If they continued to fight with the Xianjian sect, they could not guarantee that the Xianjian sect would not kill them, especially Tang Tianxing and the rest of the rogue cultivators. They were afraid that Chun Chu would take the opportunity to kill them. Damn it! After being chased out of the arena by the Xianjian sect, Tang Tianxing could not stop cursing. His face was ashen and the veins on his forehead were popping. He did not expect that they would be defeated by Chun Chu and the rest. Based on the situation, the Sunblaze sect still had a chance. It's all the fault of those rogue cultivators. If it were not for them, the Xianjian sect would not have targeted us. The disciples of the Sunblaze sect cursed and blamed Tang Tianxing, Shi Rongchong, and Du Zhao. The second chance had been used, and the Sunblaze sect was eliminated. The Sunblaze sect is really good at kicking people to the curb after they've outlived their usefulness. When he heard those words, Tang Tianxing suppressed his temper that was about to explode and replied in a deep voice. Both parties were just using each other and cooperating with each other. It was really shameful to blame them for their failure. As a result, the Sunblaze sect and Tang Tianxing's rogue cultivators turned against each other. Serves them right. Some of the onlookers scoffed and scolded them gloatingly. This matter did not affect the crowd too much. Soon, they paid attention to the situation in the arena again. Not long after the Xianjian sect won the arena, there were two other forces who went up to challenge them. However, these two forces were relatively weaker. Hence, they were defeated by the Xianjian sect. However, after these two fierce battles, the Xinjian sect had also lost a lot of their members. Some of their disciples were even injured. Although they could still fight, their combat strength was greatly reduced. Liuhe's sect, this should be the second time they're going to challenge us. Under Su Yi's observation, the people from Liuhe's sect appeared in one of the arenas and began to challenge the defending forces. The strength of Liuhe's sect was not weak. Although it was not as strong as the Xinjian sect and the Qingming sect, it was still very strong. However, they were not lucky. The opponents they challenged actually hid their strength. Under a sudden burst of strength, the Liuhe sect was caught off guard and lost with a slight disadvantage. What a pity! Su Yi felt that it was a pity. He had a good impression of Liuhe's sect. The two elders who led the team to 9-Star City and the children of the sect master of Liuhe's sect had nodded to Su Yi before. However, it was only a nodding acquaintance. I can consider selling the Bawang sect quota to them. Suddenly, Su Yi had a bright idea and thought so. Since Liuhe's sect did not have a bad relationship with him and had shown some goodwill when they met several times, Su Yi was also willing to make friends with such a force. However, the premise was that the other party must take out enough chips to exchange for the Bawang sect quota in his hands. There are less than 2 hours left before the arena competition is over. At that time, the forces that remain in the arena will have the qualifications. Those who have not used up their chances will be nullified. Just as Su Yi was thinking, Huang Jian, who was next to him, spoke again and said softly. This was one of the rules of the arena competition. Once the time was up and the battle in the arena was completely over, the arena champion would be the last to advance and obtain the qualification for the next round. There are only 2 hours left? Su Yi raised his eyebrows. The preliminaries were about to come to an end, and there would probably not be many changes in the arena. Those who were able to stay in the arena must have a certain degree of confidence. It would not be easy for the others to withstand it. Hey, what is the Qingming sect trying to do? Suddenly, Merciless West was stunned and said with great surprise. Su Yi and the others all turned their heads and saw a group of people on the Qingming sect's arena wanting to challenge them. At first glance, it was obvious that the Qingming sect, who had a lot of advantages, had admitted defeat and stepped down from the arena. After stepping down from the arena, they did not stay for long. Instead, they went straight to the Xinjian sect's arena. The Qingming sect had been guarding their arena since yesterday evening. They still had one more chance to challenge them. This time, they gave up on their own arena and used this chance to challenge Xinjian sect's arena. The Qingming sect and Xinjian sect are going to fight to the death. Su Yi frowned and mumbled. He knew that the Qingming sect and Xinjian sect had a huge grudge against each other. If nothing went wrong, Ji Tianfu would definitely attack the Qingming sect after this alliance conference to avenge the kidnapping of Ji Hanhua a few months ago. However, this was the second time the Qingming sect had plotted against Xinjian sect in this alliance conference. At this time, the people from Xinjian sect had just finished a battle and had not consumed any pills to recover. However, the Qingming sect was standing in front of them. Qingming sect, do you really think that Xinjian sect is so easy to mess with? In the crowd, Ji Tianfu's eyes were as cold as water. Chapter 1045. After the departure of Ma Guangfeng and the other 3 rogue cultivators, Xinjian faction's overall strength had been greatly weakened. Chun Chuan and the other 2 were also weaker than the 4 rogue cultivators. The missing person was made up by Xinjian faction's disciples. Therefore, Xinjian faction is definitely at a disadvantage. They will not be able to defeat Green Sanctuary faction. Merciless West raised his eyebrows and said calmly. Just as he was speaking, the battle in the arena had begun. Green Sanctuary faction and Xinjian faction had always been enemies with each other. Now that their young disciples were facing off against each other, the smell of gunpowder could be heard everywhere. Get all these people from Xinjian faction out of the arena. The arrogant young man from Green Sanctuary faction shouted as he pointed his sword at the people from Xinjian faction. Jiangsu, even if Xinjian faction is no match for you, we will still make sure you suffer. Yu and Xuan stared at the young man opposite him and said coldly. After the two of them finished talking, they started to fight. When the rest of the disciples saw this, they immediately rushed out and a chaotic battle broke out. Suddenly, the entire arena was filled with layers of light that shot up into the sky. A large amount of energy was swirling around and wreaking havoc. The battle between Green Sanctuary faction and Xianjian faction was extremely intense. Both of them had given their all and were fighting with their lives on the line. There is no doubt that Xianjian faction will be defeated. However, I don't think Ji Tianfu is that stupid. He will not let his disciples fight Green Sanctuary faction to the death. Su Yi thought to himself as he watched the battle in the arena. Su Yi felt that it was a pity. After all, he had a good relationship with Xianjian faction and Green Sanctuary faction had a grudge with him in the past. Su Yi, who was watching the battle, suddenly had an idea. A strange idea popped into his mind, and his eyes suddenly became bright and sparkling. Wait for me here. Su Yi greeted Xu Wuqing, Huang Jian, and the others beside him. Then, he ran away and rushed to the vicinity of the arena. What is this kid up to now? Seeing Su Yi like this, Merciless West instinctively felt that this guy was going to do something strange again. The few of them placed their gazes on Su Yi and saw him walking to the side of the middle-aged Origin Emperor who was hosting the convention. Senior, I have something to ask you. Su Yi cupped his hands and said to the middle-aged man. What is it? The middle-aged man who presided over the meeting was also greatly shocked by Su Yi's performance yesterday. If nothing unexpected happened, there would definitely be experts from the Alliance who would want to take him in as a disciple after the preliminaries. Therefore, the middle-aged man's attitude was quite polite when he saw the kid running over. Senior, it's like this. I want to give up my Bawang Sex ring to someone else, then use my remaining 2 chances to fight for the ring again. Su Yi blinked and looked at the middle-aged man. What? Hearing the words of the young man in front of him, the middle-aged man was stunned. What this kid meant was to give up his combat ring to someone else, and then go snatch it from someone else. The middle-aged man was a little dumbfounded. If that was the case with this kid's strength, it would be really easy for him to take another ring. Senior, what I mean is... Su Yi opened his mouth and was about to explain. Don't say any more. This is not in accordance with the rules. The middle-aged man interrupted him and shook his head. If that was the case, wouldn't the final result be that the Overlord sect would be able to occupy both arenas? It seems that before the preliminaries began, you only mentioned the process of the competition. You didn't say that a sect can't occupy 2 rings, right? Su Yi scratched his head. He really didn't hear of such a rule before participating in the convention. The reason why such a thought popped up in his mind was because it was absolutely reasonable. The middle-aged man was speechless and didn't know how to answer. What this kid said made sense. The Alliance didn't have such a strict rule. No one said that each sect could only occupy 1 ring. Senior, please hurry up and tell me the result. The time is almost up. Any later, and it will be too late. Su Yi raised his finger and pointed at the sun that had already set. There were less than 2 hours left for the competition. If this dragged on, everything would be over. This has never happened before. I can't make the decision. Wait here for a while. I'll ask the experts in the Alliance. After the middle-aged man finished speaking, he looked at Su Yi deeply and then walked towards the stands. Looking at the middle-aged man's back, Su Yi started to feel anxious. Such a thought suddenly popped up in his mind. However, he felt that it was reasonable to a certain extent. However, the Alliance meeting was organized by the 10 biggest forces in the Chaos Plane. It would only count if they agreed. No matter how wonderful his thoughts were, it was useless. Besides, the reason why Su Yi wanted to do this was because he saw that Xianjian sect was in a difficult situation. Obviously, the Green Sanctuary sect had the upper hand. With the addition of the few strong rogue cultivators, their strength had increased tremendously. On the other hand, the disciples of Xianjian sect were not weak. However, they had just suffered a great loss. In addition, their overall strength was slightly weaker. They would definitely not be able to last until the end. Coincidentally, Su Yi had a good relationship with Xianjian faction. If his idea worked, he would be able to get a slot for them. While Su-yi was deep in thought, the middle-aged man had already walked up to the experts in the stands and relayed Su-yi's words to the people of the Alliance. That kid is really not easy to deal with. Could it be that he wants to occupy 2 slots? On the stands, an old man in a red robe said in a daze. The old man in the red robe had a white beard and deep wrinkles on his face. However, his eyes were as bright as the brightest stars in the night sky. His appetite is really big, and his courage is also really big. Another old man spoke out, his eyes flickering as he spoke. I don't think this will work. If we do as he says, with his strength, he can take down 1 battle ring. With 2 challenges, he can take down 3 battle rings in total. If everyone does as he says, won't the alliance meet be a mess? A sturdy old man in his 60s thought for a moment, then waved his hand and said. Many people at the side heard this and nodded lightly, agreeing with this statement. The strength of the third-rate forces was uneven. For example, Xinjian sect and Green Sanctuary sect were very close to being second-rate forces. If there was one force that could defeat all the other forces in the alliance, with the rules that the young man had just asked for, there was a chance that they could take down 3 battle rings. Anyway, you are so strong. No matter which battle you go to, no one can defeat you. It is too much of a bully. I think we should try according to what the kid said. The old man in the red robe said again. I don't think that's appropriate. Everyone was shocked. However, none of them dared to object directly. They only felt that the old man in the red robe's words were inappropriate. At the same time, some people stopped talking. It was as if they were afraid of the old man in the red robe. There's nothing inappropriate about it. The kid is right. We don't have any hard and fast rules. So, it's okay if you say it's okay. In the end, all the interpretation rights still belong to the Alliance. The old man in the red robe smacked his lips and said, The rest of the people fell into deep thought. Other than 2 people, the rest did not dare to express too much objection. That's too easy for the kid. The Alliance meet is held once every 50 years. This has never happened before. Just as Elder CS said, everything is decided by the Alliance. The preliminaries are about to end. We don't have to do this. On the left side of the old man in the red robe, an old man in black who was similar in age to him frowned. As soon as he said that, many people around him nodded. It was obvious that the old man in black had a high status. It seems that Elder Xie has taken a fancy to the kid. However, I'm also very interested in him. Elder Xie, you have to follow the rules we agreed on. On the right side of the old man in the red robe, another old man in a green robe spoke. This old man's eyes were like copper bells. When he spoke, it was obvious that he was not a kind person. He glanced at the old man in the red robe, as if he was reminding him of something. Elder Bai, you think too much. This matter will naturally be done according to the rules. The old man in the red robe did not care about the attitude of the old man in the green robe. He said, let's solve the problem raised by the kid first. I still think we can do as he said. However, we can't let him off so easily. Didn't that guy want 2 battle rings? Sure, we can set a new rule in the preliminaries of the Alliance Conference. No matter who it is, if you want more than 1 battle ring, you have to accept challenges from multiple forces at the same time. As long as you are capable enough, you can have all 10 battle rings. What do you all think of this method? Is that so? The rest of the people raised their eyebrows one by one and started to think. This method is not bad. If the kid wants 2 battle rings, he has to accept challenges from 2 forces at the same time. His strength is strong, but it is definitely limited. It may be easy for him to fight against 20 people, but it will not be easy for him to fight against 40 people at the same time. The old man in the green robe nodded, indicating that he agreed with the old man in the red robe. Among all the third-rate forces and countless rogue cultivators, no one dared to say that they could face the joint forces of 2 mountain sects and remain undefeated. No one, including the young man, dared to believe that he could do it easily. It's decided then. Let him give up the 10th battle ring before he can continue to challenge. Moreover, he only has 1 chance. If he fails, the Bawang sect's quota will be revoked. Let him think twice before he acts. Chapter 1046. When the people from the various forces heard this, they all nodded silently. No one objected anymore. The most important reason was probably not the strength of the red-robed elder or the fierceness of the forces behind him, but the fact that this move would not bring any harm to the top 10 forces of the Alliance. The Chaos Zone had many third-rate and fourth-rate forces and countless rogue cultivators. In the eyes of these people, it did not matter who was qualified. The middle-aged man of the Origin Emperor realm took the order and returned to the arena under Su Yi's expectant gaze. When he relayed the decision made by the experts of the Alliance, Su Yi was overjoyed. That's great. His face was full of excitement. He was extremely excited about this result. You have to give up the arena that you have won and accept challenges from many parties. Only if you succeed can you become the new arena master. Otherwise, you will lose the qualification to participate in the Alliance. Think carefully before you make a decision. The middle-aged man stared deeply at Su Yi again, feeling that this young man was too different from the rest. He continued, in addition, for the sake of fairness, you have to accept at least 3 rounds of challenges before you can be counted. Unless no one dares to challenge you, then you will automatically advance after 2 hours. The last sentence was also given by the experts of the Alliance. Is that so? Su Yi touched his nose and raised his eyebrows. He could accept this request. After all, this was the only way to be fair. In particular, he had to accept 3 rounds of challenges. If there was no such rule, Su Yi would only enter the arena when the competition was about to end. Then, the other forces would not be able to compete. Okay, I accept. Seeing that there was not much time left, Su Yi immediately nodded and agreed. The middle-aged man looked at him and smiled angrily. Can you still not accept? Su Yi rolled his eyes and did not delay. He directly let the middle-aged man announce his decision. At the same time, he ran back to the crowd and found Ji Tianfu. Then, he informed Merciless West and the others. The Bawang sect has given up the 10th arena. Is there anyone willing to be the arena master? When the middle-aged man announced the news, the whole square was in an uproar. What? The Bawang sect gave up the 10th ring? Why? Is that kid stupid? He actually wants to give up the right to participate in the Grand Assembly? It's hard for other people to get the right to the Grand Assembly, even if they break their heads. He gave it away just like that. What is this Bawang sect trying to do? It can't be that simple. What is the Bawang sect up to? Everyone was stunned. Before this, they were confused. They didn't know what the teen and the middle-aged man were talking about. Now, it seemed like they were definitely discussing this matter. For a moment, the entire square was in an uproar. No one could figure out what the Bawang sect was up to. How could he give up a good spot just like that? My Sunblaze sect wants this spot. Just when the crowd was still confused, a loud voice rang out. Following which, someone quickly rushed to the battle arena. Following that, many forces reacted. An arena represented the right to participate in the Grand Assembly. Since the other party had already given it up, where else could he find such a bargain? My Lapis Lazuli Palace wants the 10th arena. My Lifeng sect also wants this right. My Soaring Rainbow Pavilion, too. My Burning Sky Pavilion also wants to fight for it. As the people from the Sunblaze sect spoke, the rest of the forces seemed to have woken up from a dream. They immediately shouted and rushed to the front of the arena. Everyone was filled with a strong sense of hope, wanting to get that spot. Only a fool wouldn't want such a good thing. Who cared what the Bawang sect was up to? A total of 17 sects want it. Let's draw lots to decide. The middle-aged man quickly ordered someone to bring some blank bamboo sticks. Using his finger as a pen, he carved a mark on each bamboo stick. One of the bamboo sticks was different from the others. The 17 bamboo sticks were placed in a pot. The middle-aged man held it in his hand and let the forces who had just registered come forward to draw. Those who drew lots were all below the Origin Void Realm. In front of the middle-aged man who was at the Origin Emperor Realm, they didn't have to worry about playing any tricks. Soon, the results of the draw were out. The Sunblaze sect has drawn the 10th arena's new champion. The middle-aged man said in a clear voice, which made the people from the other forces feel sad. On the other hand, the group of people from the Sunblaze sect was overjoyed. It was as if everyone was injected with chicken blood. Great! We actually got another opportunity to participate in the arena competition. A young man cried out in excitement. This was simply a turn of events, a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. Originally, they had completely lost the opportunity. Who would have thought that such good news would suddenly fall from the sky? The arena competition is about to end. There's less than 2 hours left. As long as we can withstand this last segment, we will be able to qualify for the next round of the competition. There was also a young man who was extremely excited as he spoke. We can't let our guard down. The last person to go up will bite like a mad dog. They're very fierce. Now that we have 3 less powerful experts, there will definitely be many people who will think that we're easy to bully and target us. A calmer person thought for a moment and analyzed. Hearing his words, the rest of the people also quieted down and nodded one after another. Right at this moment, they caught a glimpse of 3 figures walking over quickly from not far away. Everyone, we had some misunderstandings before, but we can talk about this in the future. I think that you will definitely need the help of the 3 of us now. Why don't we work together once more? A young man with a protruding mouth and ape-like cheeks arrived before the Sunblaze sect group. Behind him were 2 other young men. These 3 people were Tang Tianxing, Shi Rongchang, and Du Zhao, who had replaced Chun Shu and the other 2 to cooperate with the Sunblaze sect. They were all rogue cultivators and were powerful. Seeing them appear, the person in charge of the Sunblaze sect fell silent for a moment before saying straightforwardly, "All right, let's not talk about the past anymore. I hope that we can completely take this spot this time." Tang Tianxing and the other 2 were quite strong. If they could work together again, it would be very helpful for them to defend the arena. Right now, the Sunblaze sect did not have a better choice. "All right, let's go up the arena then." Tang Tianxing smiled, looking very treacherous. A total of 20 people from both sides stepped onto the 10th arena and replaced the Bawang sect's position. The Sunblaze sect is really lucky. They actually became arena champions again. Out of the 17 bamboo sticks, they just had to pick one. Their luck is really good. With their strength, there's a high chance that they can defend until the end. Below the arena, many people spoke with jealousy and envy. The Sunblaze sect had just been chased out of the arena by the Xianjian sect not long ago, and they were able to get back up again. One had to admit that they were really lucky. Their strength was not weak to begin with. In addition to the other forces, they had already lost a lot of strength, and there were not many who could fight them. Therefore, many people even thought that the Sunblaze sect had completely taken this spot. Not only that, but the Sunblaze sect members also had the same thought. Although many of them tried their best to suppress their emotions, they could not help but show excitement. Vaguely, the entire Sunblaze sect's aura changed, as if they were looking forward to being challenged. The Xianjian sect admits defeat. At that moment, Ji Tianfu's voice was heard from afar. Everyone near the arena could hear him. At that moment, the Xianjian sect and the Green Sanctuary sect were in the midst of an intense battle. The Green Sanctuary sect was strong, but it would not be easy for them to defeat the Xianjian sect. If they really fought to the end, they would definitely lose a layer of skin to win. Sect leader, father. The disciples of the Xianjian sect were surprised, but they did not disobey Ji Tianfu. Yuan Xuan, Ji Hanhua, and the rest stopped fighting and jumped down from the arena and walked towards them. Yuan Xuan, so the Xianjian sect is really so weak. Looking at the backs of the Xianjian sect members, someone from the Green Sanctuary sect mocked. At least they know what's good for them. Otherwise, half of their disciples would not be able to walk out of the arena today. The young man named Jiang Su said coldly with a murderous aura. Young sect leader is right. Unfortunately, the Xianjian sect is just a bunch of cowards. Beside him, many disciples of the Green Sanctuary sect agreed. Jiang Su was their young sect leader. His cultivation level was high, and he was powerful. He had already stepped in a level 8 Yuanzhen realm. Even if he was placed in a second-tier force, he would not have many opponents in the same generation. Between Jiang Su and Yu Wenxuan, they had fought before. Due to the bad relationship between the two sects, they saw each other as enemies. Senior, some of the Xinjian sect disciples were angry and wanted to refute. Ignore them. Yu and Xuan stopped the disciple and led everyone back to Ji Tianfu's side. That brat Su, what is he trying to do? Ji Tianfu shifted his gaze and looked at the young man who had spoken to Merciless West and the rest. He was puzzled. Su, he was the one who asked Xinjian sect to surrender. Regarding this, Ji Tianfu did not think too much about it. He did not even have the heart to resist. Anyway, judging from the situation, the Xinjian sect would not be able to defend the arena. They might as well surrender so that their disciples would not die. However, the thing that puzzled Ji Tianfu the most was the fact that Su Yi gave up the 10th arena. Somehow, Ji Tianfu felt that Su Yi was not a simple person. Based on his personality, he would not do anything that would cause him to lose out. Therefore, not only did Ji Tianfu not feel that there was anything wrong with it, he was also looking forward to it. Ji Tianfu really wanted to see what kind of tricks that brat could still come up with since they had already reached this step. Young sect leader, what is Bawang's sect up to? Chapter 10:47. I don't care what he's up to as long as he doesn't affect the Green Sanctuary sect. The arrogant young man, Jiang Su, said with a gleam in his eyes. He was interested in the young man from the Bawang sect. After all, the young man had caused a lot of trouble for the 7-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect. These few sects were not far from the Green Sanctuary sect and were located in the same area. Besides, the young man's performance in the primary contest was too outstanding and no one could ignore him. However, Jiang Su did not care about these things. All they needed to do was to defend the arena under their feet until the end and successfully qualify for the contest. If they could chase the Xinjian sect out of the arena, it would be a huge gain. There's only 1 hour left. The result is basically set. As time passed, many people started to care about the final result. At the same time, many people kept looking at the young man who had already left the arena. The young man from the Bawang sect had voluntarily given up on an arena. Everyone wanted to know what he was thinking. Young man, are you sure you want to challenge multiple arenas at the same time? The middle-aged man who was in charge of the contest asked seriously in front of Su Yi. Of course. Su Yi nodded to show that he was sure. Now, only the 3rd and 10th arenas are unchallenged. Do you want to wait for more arenas to be empty, or do you want to challenge these 2 arenas at the same time? The middle-aged man looked at the young man in front of him with sparkling eyes. At this moment, the other 8 arenas had 2 factions carrying out their final battles. Only the 3rd and 10th arenas were empty. On the 3rd arena, it was the Green Sanctuary sect that had just forced the Xinjian sect to surrender. On the 10th arena that Su Yi had given up, it was the Sunblaze sect that was extremely lucky. The people from these 2 forces had already decided that they would be able to defend until the end and obtain the final qualification. If Su Yi wanted to challenge them now, he could only choose between these 2 options. Otherwise, he could wait for the other forces to emerge victorious. I'm not waiting anymore. I'll challenge these 2 arenas. Su Yi thought for a while and shook his head. He knew that with his strength, it would not be difficult for him to win if he challenged all 3 arenas at the same time. However, there was not much time left, and he did not know when the other forces would emerge victorious. Secondly, he wanted to preserve some of his strength and did not want to reveal all of his strength. It would be disadvantageous for him. Thirdly, the forces in the other 8 arenas had nothing to do with Su Yi's side. Su Yi's side. However, things were different when it came to the Green Sanctuary sect and the Sunblaze sect. Given the bad relationship between the Green Sanctuary sect and the Xinjian sect, as well as the grudge between the 3 loose cultivators from the Sunblaze sect and Shinshuan, Su Yi felt that he would not hesitate to take action. He had already considered the Xinjian sect and Chun Chu and his friends. Not to mention, young Master Wang and the others from the Green Sanctuary sect had once attacked him. Although no one knew about this, Su Yi had never forgotten about it. The middle-aged man nodded. Then he rose into the air and announced loudly, "The Overlord sect will challenge the 3rd and 10th arenas simultaneously." What? When the middle-aged man said that, the square fell into silence. Everyone was dumbfounded. On the arena, the Green Sanctuary sect and the Sunblaze sect were even more confused and unable to make heads or tails of the situation. The champions of the 3rd and 10th arenas can join forces to fight against the Bawang sect, the middle-aged man said again. Then he explained the rules that had just been announced. In an instant, the square was in an uproar. What the F***CK? The Alliance meeting has such rules? You can play like that? Challenging 2 arenas at the same time with 40 people. Just thinking about it makes me feel hopeless. It's basically impossible. It might not be possible for others, but it's hard to say for that young man from the Bawang sect. 3 rounds. He has to go through at least 3 rounds of challenges. Unless no one enters the arena, he will automatically advance. This is too much. This has never happened before in the Alliance meeting, right? It would be strange if it had. Since ancient times, how many forces have dared to do this? That's simply courting death. Even if someone has done it before, they probably didn't think in this direction. Most people don't have such a strange way of thinking. It's mainly because that guy from the Bawang sect is too strong. There's really hope for him to win 2 arenas. All kinds of discussions rose, causing the square to be bustling with noise and excitement. Everyone stared at the young man in front of the arenas in a daze. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. Yesterday, the young man had shocked everyone with a single brilliant feat, causing countless people to gasp in admiration. Originally, after his automatic advancement, everyone thought that he had already shone brightly and that it was enough. The primary selection this time was no longer his stage. Who would have thought that just an hour before the end of the preliminaries, that fellow would cause another round of trouble, causing countless people to be shocked? The most shocked people were the 40 young people in the 2 arenas. How could this be? How could this be? Some people in the Sunblaze sect had already begun to panic, and their teeth were chattering. They had witnessed the young man's arrogance below the arenas yesterday. He had fought against the top 20 young experts of 2 sects alone and killed all of his opponents in an absolutely crushing manner. When that scene was replayed again, it still caused them to feel uncontrollably shocked. What do we do? How can we defeat that young man? Some people were about to cry. The young man from the Bawang sect had left an extremely fierce impression in their minds, and they couldn't help but feel afraid. The Gimdeo sect and the 7-star sword school were both much stronger than the Sunblaze sect in terms of overall strength. The 2 sects had sent out their top 10 disciples to fight, but they were all killed. This kind of result made the people from the Sunblaze sect unable to muster any courage to face that young man. Don't panic. He wants to challenge 2 arenas at the same time, and the Green Sanctuary sect will fight with us. They're not to be trifled with either. Tang Tianxing said in a deep voice to everyone from the Sunblaze sect. Although that was what he said, his gaze was extremely serious, and his heart was filled with uncertainty. Now, all of their hopes were placed on the Green Sanctuary sect. They were a very powerful force, and even the Xinjian sect was no match for them. That young man wants to make an enemy out of the Green Sanctuary sect? On the Green Sanctuary sect side, the disciples were all furious. They naturally knew how strong the young man from the Bawang sect was, so they were all furious at him. Challenging 2 arenas at the same time? Does he really think he's invincible? The Green Sanctuary sect's young sect master, Jiang Su, snorted coldly as he glanced at the young man below. He knew that he was no match for that young man, but Jiang Su didn't think that the 20 people from the Green Sanctuary sect and the Sunblaze sect would have no chance of stopping him. Young sect master, we should be careful. That young man is very strange. The 7-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect have suffered losses at his hands. We can't let our guard down. The rogue cultivator, Ma Guangfeng, walked up to Jiang Su and said solemnly. His point of view was completely different from Jiang Su's. He felt that the outcome of today's battle was already uncertain and that the Green Sanctuary sect was most likely going to be eliminated. Su Yi, that young man. In the crowd, Ji Tianfu was already speechless. That young man could always do something unexpected. Is he really that confident? Yuan Xian's face was also filled with shock as he muttered in disbelief. He can definitely do it. He won't do anything that he's not confident in. Ji Tianfu's eyes were clear, and one could vaguely see the infatuation in the depths of his eyes, causing Ji Tianfu to shake his head with a bitter smile. Let's begin. Soon, the middle-aged man hosting the competition spoke again. Sui nodded and flew up to the 10th arena. Under the middle-aged man's signal, the 20 figures from the Green Sanctuary sect also flew out from the 3rd arena and arrived at the 10th arena. Sui stood in the middle, with the people from the Sunblaze sect on his right and the people from the Green Sanctuary sect on his left. Young man, you've already offended the Gimdeo sect and the 7 Star Sword School. Do you still want to become enemies with the Green Sanctuary sect? I advise you to stop now. Otherwise, regardless of whether you win today, the Green Sanctuary sect and the Bawang sect will be irreconcilable. Jiangsu pulled out his long sword and pointed it at Sui from afar as he spoke coldly. Through the previous battles between the 7 Star Sword School, the Gimdeo sect, and the Bawang sect, they could roughly determine the overall strength of the Bawang sect. It was unlikely that they would be stronger than the 2 sects combined. Therefore, Jiangsu believed that once this young man became enemies with the Green Sanctuary sect, it would be no different from courting death. If he was smart enough, he would definitely choose to protect the entire Bawang sect instead of relying on his strength to do whatever he wanted. Are you threatening me? I met a few people from the Green Sanctuary sect last time, and they were just as overbearing. However, they all died in my hands. Sui glanced at Jiangsu and said coldly. The people Sui was talking about were naturally the people led by young Master Wang. What? A disciple from the Green Sanctuary sect exclaimed as if he suddenly thought of something. Are you talking about Wang Mo? Jiangsu also raised his head and looked coldly at Sui, wanting to hear his answer. I don't know if he's called Wang Mo. I only know that he's some young Master Wang from the Green Sanctuary sect. Sui sneered and replied without hiding anything. Young man, so Wang Mo and the disciples of the Green Sanctuary sect were all killed by you. Wang Su's expression changed completely as a murderous aura emanated from his body. Wang Mo and the disciples of the Green Sanctuary sect were not weak. They were killed while they were training in the mountains, but the murderer was never found. Until today, the truth of this case suddenly came to light. Chapter 1048. According to Sui, 3 of the 5 sects in the area where the Green Sanctuary sect was located have been thoroughly offended by this kid. Now, only the Xinjian sect and the Liuhe sect were left. There was no news of any hostility between them and the Bawang sect. You really have a lot of nonsense to say. It seems like the people of the Green Sanctuary sect only know how to talk. Sui sneered and said indifferently, Kid, you're asking for it. Jiangsu was furious when he heard what Sui said. He immediately raised his sword and attacked. A bright sword radiance shot up to the sky and slashed down, aiming for Sui's head. Let's go together. The rest of the disciples of the Green Sanctuary sect looked at each other. Suddenly, they rushed up and unleashed a terrifying wave of energy that enveloped the young man. They did not dare to let Jiangsu fight with Sui alone. If they were not careful, the young sect leader would die here. If that happened, they would not be able to answer to the sect leader. At that moment, not only the disciples of the Green Sanctuary sect, even Ma Guangfeng, Jie Xiuyang, Qi Tsongxian, and Dong Qingzhou, the 4 rogue cultivators, used their full strength. They knew how terrifying Sui was and did not dare to slack off. Good timing. Seeing the 20 figures charging at him, Sui took out a big saber and held it in his hand. He shouted and rushed out to fight with the 20 people. What should we do? When a battle broke out, many of the people of the Sunblaze sect had not recovered from the shock and were still afraid. What else can we do? If we want to defend the arena, we have to join forces with the Green Sanctuary sect and defeat this young man. Tang Tianxing gritted his teeth and rushed up. The remaining disciples of the Sunblaze sect and rogue cultivators thought about it and felt that Ma Guangfeng's words made sense. Therefore, They did not waste any more time and unleashed powerful attacks toward the young man in the middle. In an instant, an unprecedented battle broke out on the 10th arena. 40 figures surrounded the young man in the middle and attacked him continuously. Don't swarm him. Follow the order and exhaust this kid. Jiangsu was very powerful, and he was also the young master of the Green Sanctuary sect. Under his instructions, the 20 people of the Green Sanctuary sect started to form some simple but effective formations. In an instant, the 20 people advanced and retreated according to the rules. Terrifying attacks rained down, causing the youth in the middle to be unable to stop for even a moment. He had to face attacks from time to time. Very soon, it was not just the people from the Green Sanctuary sect. The people from the Sunblaze sect caught up as well, forming an even more terrifying offensive. There were a total of 40 people from both sides, and all of them were rare powerhouses of the younger generation. Moreover, they were led by powerhouses like Jiangsu and Ma Guangfeng. In this way, there were at least 7 or 8 people besieging Su Yi in every attack. Wave after wave of terrifying energy surged out like the surging waves of the sea, setting off boundless violent waves. Rumble. The space around the stage was trembling as one attack after another collided and exploded. The destructive energy surged and rumbled without end. The stage that had been set up by the Origin Emperor expert was also shaking under the battle situation. However, it still stood firmly and did not collapse. Swoosh! Swoosh! The large saber in Su Yi's hand danced about in an airtight manner, blocking all the attacks as he stepped on the stage with ease. He didn't exert too much strength. The joint attacks of these people were indeed swift and violent, but Su Yi's cultivation was at the second level of the Origin Void stage, and he completely looked down upon these 40 people. Every time the 7 or 8 people attacked at the same time, it was impossible to shake Su Yi even with their strength added together. If it was a competition of endurance, Su Yi's void divine ocean was boundlessly vast, and his origin energy was endless and difficult to exhaust. He would not lose to these people no matter what. It's my turn now. Suddenly, Su Yi grunted lightly, and these words came out from his throat. He'd already roughly grasped the strength of his opponents, and the strongest were only a few people, led by Jiangsu, Ma Guangfeng, and the others. Raging Dragon Slash. The origin energy in Su Yi's entire body circulated madly as he abruptly raised his saber above his head and slashed down fiercely. Oem! Oem! A resplendent saber light instantly took form, and it was like an enormous pillar of light that was held in his hand as he slashed down abruptly. This saber light directly slashed a round of attacks from the Green Sanctuary sect and Sunblaze sect disciples. The terrifying light struck down with peerless sharpness, and it instantly slashed apart the large area of attacks that were tangled together. Subsequently, Su Yi's saber light didn't lose momentum and easily tore apart all the energy attacks, shattering them into pieces. Amongst these few disciples, some of them suffered quite a bit of shock, and they couldn't help but cry out in shock, and they were extremely astonished. Dodge, let us do it. Right at this moment, Ma Guangfeng's loud shout sounded out, and an expanse of dense attacks once again assaulted over. The saber light and sword light were mixed together, crisscrossing as they wantonly assaulted with peerless might, and all of them charged toward Su Yi. You're still not enough. Su Yi's expression remained unchanged as he spoke indifferently, and he raised his saber to meet the attacks before fiercely slashing out once more. TSK! 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 Under this slash, the air let out a scorching sound of friction, and sparks shot out. Ma Guangfeng and his group's attacks were once again slashed apart by him, and a huge gap appeared. Following that, all the attacks were crushed into pieces, completely unable to pose any threat to Su Yi. After doing all this, Su Yi suddenly took a step forward and directly arrived in front of Ma Guangfeng. His saber was shining brightly as he brazenly slashed towards him. When such a slash landed, Ma Guangfeng hastily unleashed an unprecedented amount of power, and then used the weapon in his hand to block it, wanting to resist. Puff! In the end, he was sent flying backwards, and his body drew an arc in the air as he crashed heavily into the arena, and blood spurted out from his mouth. His body lay on the ground, and he couldn't get up for a long time. Soon, there was no movement, and he seemed to have fainted. If it weren't for Jiang Su's timely arrival, and Su, he had to stop to deal with him, the attack just now would have been stronger, and it would have definitely killed Ma Guangfeng in one blow. Su, he continued to fight, and he faced Jiang Su and his group. Below the arena, pairs of eyes were filled with incomparable shock. The young man was too strong. Although his performance today was not as strong and bloody as yesterday's, and instead looked like he was taking a stroll in the park, it still brought a great impact to the audience. 40 people, that's 40 people. The sound of people rolling their throats was unparalleled, and they couldn't hide their astonishment. 1 against 40, this kind of thing was enough to make people feel aghast. It seems like Brother Su is much stronger than we thought. Among the crowd of Xinjian faction, Chen Chuan's face was filled with shock. Even though he had witnessed the massacre yesterday, he was still extremely shocked. Ji Tianfu, Yuan Xuan, Ji Hanhua, Shen Hong, Yi Haokong, and the others were all the same. How much strength does this kid have that he hasn't used? Could it be that under the siege of 40 people, he still can't be forced to use all his strength? Ji Tianfu's eyes were clear, and he couldn't believe it. Compared to the 20 people from 7-Star Sword School and Gimdeo sect yesterday, the overall strength of 40 people was not doubled. However, based on their orderly attacks, even an ordinary original Void Realm expert would find it difficult to deal with them. However, Su Yi's situation seemed to be more relaxed. This kid is really a freak. On the square, Jiang Zikan, the sect leader of Green Sanctuary sect, was leading a group of disciples to watch the battle. At this moment, his face was extremely gloomy. He had heard the conversation on the arena earlier, and he knew that the young man was the murderer of Wang Mo and the others. Regarding this, Jiang Zikan already felt that his Green Sanctuary sect and Bawang sect would probably declare war on each other. That kid was their enemy, and he really hoped that he would die on the arena. However, looking at the current situation, the possibility of that happening was almost zero. Moreover, the people who would lose in the end would probably be Green Sanctuary sect and Sunblaze sect. When we return, we must think of a way to defeat Bawang's sect and kill this kid. Otherwise, there will be no end of trouble in the future. Jiang Zikan's eyes flashed as he looked at the reckless young man on the arena with a murderous intent. On the arena, Su Yi forced Jiang Su and the others back with a slash of his saber. Then, relying on his absolute advantage in speed, he ruthlessly slashed out with his saber and sent Jiang Su flying. Under the absolute suppression of strength, the Green Sanctuary sect's young sect leader crashed onto the ground with a loud crash. Dense cracks appeared on the stone platform below him. Along with a mouthful of blood, Jiang Su's face instantly turned as white as a sheet of paper. His chi was dispirited, and he no longer had the strength to fight. Su Yi, on the other hand, did not even glance at him. This was because in Su Yi's eyes, his opponent's level of strength was no longer worthy of his attention. Su Yi had been hiding his true strength all this time. The competition was about to end, and these 40 people were no match for him at all. Therefore, his performance was similar to when he faced off against the 7-Star Sword School and Gimdeo sect in the previous round. Under the siege of 40 people, his attacks were not as clean and efficient, but he still had the upper hand. It's time to end this. After these words came out of Su Yi's mouth, he dragged his saber with one hand and slashed down again and again. As he disintegrated his opponent's attacks, he also sent many people flying, causing many of them to be severely injured. The disciples of Green Sanctuary sect and Sunblaze sect were completely suppressed and ruthlessly trampled on at this moment. All of their orderly attacks were unable to take shape under the suppression of absolute strength. Su Yi's final target changed as he stared at Jiang Su, who was lying on the arena. The young man quickly stepped out and raised his saber, intending to behead the Green Sanctuary sect's young sect leader. The Green Sanctuary sect admits defeat. At this critical moment, Jiang Zikin, who was below the arena, sensed that something was wrong and suddenly shouted. Chapter 1049. What a pity! As Jiang Zikin admitted defeat, he smacked his lips and said regretfully. Then, everyone from the Green Sanctuary sect retreated to the edge of the arena. Those who were injured like Jiang Su were also taken away. We admit defeat as well. Immediately, someone from the Sunblaze sect shouted in panic. Then, a group of figures retreated like the tide without hesitation. What a joke. The Green Sanctuary sect had already admitted defeat. If the Sunblaze sect were to fight with this young man, they would definitely suffer in the end. Everyone could clearly distinguish the pros and cons, so it was not difficult to make a choice. Jiang Su was carried down the arena by the Green Sanctuary sect disciples and into the crowd of the Green Sanctuary sect. What a Bawang sect! Jiang Zikin fed his son a few pills. His eyes were deep, and his face was so dark that it was about to drip water. This time, the Green Sanctuary sect could be considered to have suffered a huge setback. The enmity between them and the Bawang sect was completely formed. Let's go. After staring at the young man in the arena for a while, Jiang Zikin swung his sleeves and snorted coldly. He then led everyone from the Green Sanctuary sect away. The people from the Sunblaze sect, Tang Tianxing, Ma Guangfeng, and the other independent cultivators all had extremely ugly expressions. In the end, they left unwillingly. That young man succeeded. He fought against 40 people alone and defeated 2 sects working together. He succeeded in his challenge and occupied 2 arenas. The Bawang sect is only 1 person, but it's enough to defeat dozens of people from the other sects. The Green Sanctuary sect and the Sunblaze sect are considered lucky. No one died. This young man is amazing. If he can grow up safely, he will definitely be a tyrant in the future. In the square, everyone began to discuss fervently again. The actions of the young man from the Overlord sect had truly caused everyone to be shocked. It was not difficult for them to imagine that many years later, he would have a place in the world. Will anyone else go up to challenge him? The experts present were curious. Under such circumstances, there should be no one who would challenge the young man. As long as one was smart, they should be able to see how powerful he was. None of the forces that came this time were a match for him. Even if 2 forces joined forces, it would not be enough. Sure enough, as time passed quickly, the battles on the other 8 arenas had also completely ended, and their respective champions had emerged. Gui Yuan Sect, White Flame Sect, Fire Dragon Society, Heaven Severing Sect, Scarlet Wind Pavilion, Mad Blade Sect, Purple Light Sword Sect, Blue Fire Sect. There were a total of 8 sects, and they were all third-rate forces in the Chaos Realm. Every one of them was extraordinary, and they were not far from being second-rate forces. Green Sanctuary faction and Xinjian faction are both unfortunate. They should have been strong enough to occupy a spot. Someone in the crowd sighed. The Xinjian sect was tricked by the Green Sanctuary sect. In the end, he was also defeated by the Bawang sect. Both of their strengths were extremely close to the level of second-rate powers, and they were originally the strongest contenders in the Alliance Conference. Many people felt that it was a pity that they had been eliminated this time. Of course, there were other forces like the Green Sanctuary sect and the Xinjian sect. Time passed quickly, and the final time passed quickly. 2 hours have passed, and there are no more challenges. The Bawang sect has obtained the right to 2 arenas. The middle-aged man in charge of the conference suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and announced to everyone. Since the beginning of the Alliance Conference, this was probably the first time such a situation had happened. A mountain sect occupying 2 spots. If this had happened in the past, it would have been an earth-shattering matter. However, on this day, such a strange thing had really happened, and everyone had witnessed it with their own eyes. Does the Bawang sect have any other young experts? That's 40 spots. If they don't have enough people, it would be a waste. Suddenly, someone thought of this and was filled with envy and jealousy. If the Bawang sect only sent this young man to participate in the conference, wouldn't it mean that 39 spots would be wasted? If that was really the case, it would be too much of a bully. Many sects did not even have a single spot and could only look on helplessly. As for the Overlord sect, not only did they not take a sh*t, they even took 40 of them in one go. Wasn't that infuriating? However, everyone was helpless as well. Who asked the young man to be so strong? This was the result of fighting on his own. If his own disciples were as good as him, no one would be able to say anything even if he went and challenged all 10 arenas. This is fate. The Alliance Conference is held once every 50 years. If we miss it, so be it. Someone sighed, expressing deep helplessness. He really did it. On the side of the Xinjian sect, Ji Tianfu, Ji Hanhua, Yuan Xuan, Chun Chuan, Shun Hong, Yi Haokong, and the others could not hide the bitter smile on their faces. At this time, they were already a little numb, and it was difficult for them to be as shocked as they were at the beginning. This is the pass for the next round of the conference. Keep it well, and use this pass to participate in the next round of the conference. Above the arena, the middle-aged man of the Yuan Emperor realm rose into the air again. With a wave of his hand, a black shadow sprinkled down like raindrops, falling onto the arena. These black shadows were caught by the experts on the arena. When they took a look, they were black objects half the size of a palm. They looked like gold, but not gold, like jade, but not jade. They were warm to the touch, and the texture was excellent. Invisibly, there was a special energy flowing in them. However, if one did not look carefully, it would be difficult to detect. Is this the pass? The disciples of the 8 major sects each held a pass in their hands, and their faces were filled with excitement. As long as they had the pass, they would be able to enter the next round of the conference and compete with the geniuses of the first and second class forces. That was the real test, a total of 40 pass. We really struck it rich. Among everyone, only Su Yi had obtained 40 pass talismans. He could not hold all of them with both hands, and had to use his clothes to carry them. Su Yi was grinning from ear to ear, and his eyes shone with green light. Looking at the pass talismans in his hands, it was as if he was looking at a small mountain of primordial stones. He was the only one in the Bawang sect. If he were to sell all of the remaining 39 pass talismans, he would definitely make a considerable amount of money. At the thought of this, Su Yi could not help but feel excited. Kid, what are you so proud of? Why aren't you leaving? At this moment, Merciless West's voice rang in Su Yi's ears. Only he could hear it. It was the art of telepathy. Su Yi calmed himself down, jumped down from the arena, and returned to the Bawang sect. Then he saw Ji Tianfu and the rest of the Xinjian sect walking towards him from afar. Let's go back first, Su Yi said to Merciless West, Green Emperor, Yin Yang Emperor of Hell, and the rest with a smile, pretending that he did not see them. The group from the Overlord sect quickly left, leaving Ji Tianfu, who had been waiting for a long time, in vain. That kid is trying to avoid me? Ji Tianfu raised his eyebrows, looking a little unhappy. Initially, he wanted to get close to Su Yi and ask him for some places so that the Xinjian sect disciples could participate in the competition, who knew that the kid seemed to be avoiding him and disappeared without a trace. Is something wrong with Su Yi? Ji Hanhua, who was standing beside her, asked. The battle is over. What's wrong with him? Ji Tianfu rolled his eyes at his daughter and said angrily, he can't hide. Let's go to the inn and find him. Having said that, he asked Yuan Xuan to bring the Xinjian sect disciples back to their residence, and then he and Ji Hanhua went to the inn where Su Yi was staying. Ji Tianfu had made up his mind. No matter what, he had to get a few places today. That kid got 40 places on his own. Looks like Ji Tianfu is going to look for him. Not long after the Xinjian sect disciples left, another group of people came to the place where the Bawang sect disciples were staying. These people were led by 2 old men, and there was a conspicuous man and a woman. They were from Liuha's sect. They originally wanted to congratulate Su Yi but seeing Ji Tianfu's expression, it seemed like he was familiar with the young man. Elder Feng, Elder Ge, let's go first. Liu Sect did not get a place, and it's useless for us to stay in 9-Star City. Let's go back. Lin Donghao thought for a while and said to the two old men beside him, actually, you can also see the next round of the conference. That is the real heavenly pride battle. The best disciples of the first and second-rate forces will be there. It will be good for you to observe more. Elder Feng Qizong replied without hesitation. Elder, you're right. However, we can't participate in it, so it's meaningless for us to observe. If we can get a place, Lin Bingyao shook her head slightly, and her face was full of regret. As long as one was an outstanding member of a younger generation, they hoped to be able to participate in the second round of the conference. However, there were hundreds of forces that signed up in the Chaos territory. Only 10 of them could make it to the end, and this time there were only 9. It was a pity that Liu's sect could not get one of them. That young man from the Bawang sect still has 39 places. Why don't we ask him for a few? Anyway, there are more places, and it would be a waste if he doesn't use them. If he is willing, we can let a few people from Liu's sect enter the second round to see it. It will be a worthwhile trip. Suddenly, Elder Ge, who had been silent, frowned and said. When a few people next to him heard this, their eyes lit up, and then they all smiled bitterly. That young man is at most an acquaintance. Maybe he doesn't even know who we are. Why should we ask him for a few places? Lin Donghao shrugged and said the truth. They had come all the way here to congratulate the young man from the Overlord sect. They wanted to get closer to him so that when they were in the same area in the future, they could help each other out. They also wanted to avoid becoming enemies with such a terrifying person. But unfortunately, the other party ran too fast, and he couldn't find his shadow in an instant. Chapter 1050. The people from the 6 Unity sect left the square and soon disappeared. All the people who came to watch the battle or participate in the preliminaries, as well as the 8 sects who obtained the final qualification, were overjoyed and left one after another. Su Yi and the others returned to the inn. Not long after, they saw Ji Tian Fu come to their door. Sect leader Ji, Miss Hanua, please take a seat first. I'll be done here soon. If there's anything, we'll talk later. Su Yi hurriedly called for Ji Tian Fu and Ji Han Nua, the father and daughter, and called for the waiter to bring some tea. Then, he turned his head and looked at Huang Jian, who was sitting at the table and writing on a piece of white paper. What are you writing? Ji Han Nua was curious. She stretched her head and looked at the words on the paper. Write like this, write like this. Each slot is sold for 50,000 yuan. If you buy more than 10 slots, you could get a 20% discount. Su Yi stood beside the table and pointed. Huang Jian listened to him and wrote everything down on a piece of paper. Ji Tian Fu, who had just picked up the tea and was about to take a sip, moved his ears and was stunned. Sui, are you selling the slots? Ji Tian Fu's expression changed, and he quickly asked. He came here to ask Su Yi for some slots. He did not expect that Su Yi would want to sell the slots. This made Ji Tian Fu a little anxious. Moreover, according to the words just now, each slot was sold for 50,000 yuan, 1-star primordial stones. Ji Tian Fu immediately became excited. If this was the case, he could get 20 to 30 slots at once and send all the disciples of the Xianjian sect to the second round of the test to gain experience. That's right. Su Yi nodded and said to Ji Tian Fu, without raising his head, I'm the only one from the Bawang sect who can participate in the next round of the competition. The remaining 39 slots can't be wasted. If I can sell them for some primordial stones, it's more or less good. 50,000 2-star primordial stones per slot is not very expensive. What? When Ji Tian Fu heard this, he immediately became anxious. He dug his ears, as if he was afraid that he had misheard. He anxiously said, What did you say? 50,000 2-star origin stones? As he spoke, he widened his eyes and looked at Su Yi with extreme fear in his eyes, as if he was frightened. Of course, such a precious quota can't be sold for 50,000 star essence stones, right? That would be too cheap. Su Yi nodded and spoke in a matter-of-fact manner. This Ji Tianfu's face alternated between green and white as he cursed in his heart. He really wanted to say, "Damn it, why don't you just go rob me?" Ji Tianfu cursed in his heart. 50,000 2-star essence stones for a spot, and he had wanted to buy 20 spots. Adding up to a total of over 1,000,000 2-star essence stones, it was equivalent to over 100 million 1-star essence stones. Even though Xinjiang faction could afford to fork out such a huge sum of money, it would still be a huge loss for them. Beside Ji Tianfu, Ji Hanua's expression was not any better. The young girl looked at Su Yi and then looked at her father. She opened her mouth, but did not say anything. "Sect Master Ji, do you want it? Seeing that we have a good relationship, I can sell it to you at a 40% discount." When Huang Jian was almost done writing, Su Yi stood up and said to Ji Tianfu with a smile. Then he glanced at Ji Tianfu's expression and suddenly said in surprise, "Hey, Sect Master Ji, why is your face so ugly?" Ji Tianfu did not answer immediately. His originally ugly face actually showed some signs of loosening up at this moment. If 50,000 star essence stones became 30,000, this price could be accepted even if one pinched their nose. However, it still made one feel uncomfortable. But now, Ji Tianfu understood a lot in his heart. It seemed that Su Yi was still a kid who cared about relationships. This made things easier for him. He could negotiate the price. 33,000 2-star essence stones is still a little too expensive. I will not beat around the bush with you. Give me a 40% discount. If you give me a 40% discount, I want 20 slots. Ji Tianfu suddenly stretched out his middle finger and waved it in front of Su Yi. He looked at him seriously and said, looking at Ji Tianfu's expression, Su Yi was stunned at first. Then he smiled faintly and said, "Since Sect Master Ji is so forthright, I, Su Yi, would be too stingy. That would be too outrageous. Let's do as Sect Master Ji said. 40% discount, 20,000 2-star essence stones for one slot. 20 slots, that would be 400,000 2-star essence stones." After Su Yi finished speaking, he directly took out 20 passage talismans from his spatial bag and placed them on the table. He asked, "Sect Master Ji, do you want to pay now or on credit?" Looking at the passage talismans, Ji Tianfu revealed a happy expression. He put his hand on the table and said generously, "Let's pay now. 400,000 2-star essence stones. I can still afford it." He also took out a spatial bag. After checking it for a while, he directly threw it to Su Yi. Then, he kept the 20 passage talismans on the table. Sect Master Ji is really a straightforward person. Let's have dinner here tonight. Call all the disciples of Xinjiang faction over. I will treat everyone to a drink. Su Yi checked the primeval essence stones in the spatial bag. Immediately, he smiled and said to Ji Tianfu with great enthusiasm, "Let's have a drink next time. After the Alliance Conference is over, we will go back and drink." Ji Tianfu shook his head and said, "Also, about the matter that I told you last time, I wonder what you think about it, Su Yi. Actually, Sect Master Ji should already have a result, right?" Su Yi smiled faintly and said softly. Of course, Su Yi knew that Ji Tianfu was referring to the alliance that he had proposed. During the preliminaries of the Alliance Conference, Su Yi had asked Xinjiang faction to admit defeat and went against Green Sanctuary sect. This was considered to have made some things clear. Of course, Ji Tianfu understood that Su Yi had agreed to let Bawang's sect and Xinjiang faction form an alliance. All right, we will discuss the details when we get back. Everything will wait until the Alliance Conference is over. Today, I will not stay here any longer. I will take my leave first. See you later." Ji Tianfu looked at Su Yi and said. He then put his hands together and walked out of the house with Ji Hanua. After Su Yi sent the two of them out, he closed the door behind him. However, in the next moment, Ji Tianfu could vaguely hear an excited voice coming from the house. "I'm rich. I'm rich." The voice was very soft. However, with Ji Tianfu's strength, he could hear it clearly. Instantly, the sect leader of Xinjiang faction frowned. "Father, what's wrong?" Ji Hanua looked up and asked, "Nothing. Let's go." Jian Fu smiled bitterly and said to his daughter. He could roughly guess what was going on. The 20,000 two-star primal stones for one slot was definitely within Su Yi's expectations. In other words, the price could still be negotiated. However, Jian Fu did not think too much about it. He was already satisfied to be able to get 20 slots. "Kid, can you not be such a money grubber?" In the house, Merciless West said helplessly to Su Yi. Regardless of whether it was the last time Jian Fu was here or the negotiation just now, Merciless West had been alone at the side and did not participate in it at all. "Hee, I'm too excited." Su Yi laughed and was filled with excitement. 20,000 primal stones for one slot was the price that Su Yi had thought of from the beginning. To be honest, he had originally planned to give some slots to Xianjian faction. After all, he was the one who asked them to come down from the arena and challenge Green Sanctuary faction and Sunblaze faction at the same time. Other than that, Su Yi felt that Jian Fu was quite trustworthy. Since Jian Fu had helped him a lot, he was willing to give some of the slots away. However, what Su Yi did not expect was that Jian Fu did not even try to bargain with him. Instead, he gave him a price without hesitation. Naturally, Su Yi could not reject the primal stones that were given to him. He had no choice but to accept them. Most importantly, Su Yi was in need of money. Spiritual Treasures faction still had a huge debt of nearly 1 billion waiting for him to pay back. Half of the 1 year had passed. Su Yi was very anxious. "I'll compensate them in other ways in the future." Su Yi felt that he had let Xianjian faction down this time. All he could do was to give them some benefits in the future. There are still 19 slots left. "Boss, what do you plan to do?" Handsome Su jumped onto the table and asked. Before Su Yi could answer, Merciless West said, "You have to be careful when you deal with these 19 slots. If the 7-star sword school, Gimdeo sect, or Green Sanctuary faction were to buy them, I'm afraid that they will bring you a lot of trouble in the conference later on." After listening to Merciless West's reminder, Su Yi nodded gently to show that he agreed. The young disciples of those factions were no match for Su Yi. They would not be able to defeat him even if they all went up against him. However, if they were to secretly sabotage him in the conference later on, it would definitely bring him some trouble. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that these people were Su Yi's enemies. Allowing them to participate in the conference to benefit from it and increase the strength of his enemies was something that Su Yi could not do. "Actually, I already have a target, which is the Liu's sect. If they're willing to buy all of them, this matter will be perfect." Su Yi rubbed his chin and thought of those people that he had only nodded to. The Liu's sect is not weak. You have now offended the 7-star sword school, Gimdeo sect, and Green Sanctuary faction at the same time. At the same time, you have also joined forces with Xianjian sect. If you can pull the Liu's sect to your side, there's a high chance that you will rise quickly and become a new third-rate faction. Merciless West thought for a while and said to Su Yi. This was something that Su Yi had considered many times. The Bawang sect now had many top experts. They were not weaker than those third-rate factions. In fact, they were even stronger. What they lacked now was the basic and core strength. If they wanted to rise successfully, it would not be possible to rely on Merciless West, Green Emperor, and Yin Yang Emperor of the Underworld. However, the Bawang sect did not have any foundation. Chapter 10:51. Actually, there is another way. While Su Yi was thinking, the Yin Yang Ghost Emperor next to him said, "Master, you can distribute the 19 places to recruit experts to join the Bawang sect. I believe that many individual cultivators will be willing to join the Bawang sect under this temptation. It's a good idea, but it's also risky." Su Yi nodded, then shook his head. He then said, "If that's the case, all the loose cultivators who join will be aiming for a spot in the Grand Assembly. They won't be able to feel a sense of belonging to the Overlord sect." As soon as he said that, all the people present nodded in agreement. Su Yi had always been like this. Only by becoming one of his own people could they get benefits from him. On the other hand, If he used benefits to entice others to join him, he could not be sure whether the people he recruited would be disloyal. I'd better go and find the people of the Liyue sect. I should have asked Ji Tianfu more about the Liyue sect, Su Yi said again. Then he did not delay and left the inn with the Green Emperor and the Yin-Yang Ghost Emperor. First, he found the Xianjian sect according to the route Su Xiaoshui had told him. He asked Ji Tianfu about the Liyue sect and said that he intended to form an alliance with them and sell the remaining places to them. Ji Tianfu was surprised by Su Yi's arrival and what he said. However, he did not hide anything and said directly, the Liyue sect and the Xianjian sect don't have much dealings with each other. They don't have many grievances with the Xianjian sect. In addition, they have a good reputation in that area. Sect leader Lin Jinyang is not a treacherous and cunning person. But if you want to form an alliance, you'd better go back and talk about it. With such an answer, Su Yi was relieved. He inquired about the whereabouts of the Liyue sect and went to find them with the Green Emperor and the Yin-Yang Ghost Emperor. But before he left, he asked Shen Chuan, Shun Hong, and Yi Haokong, the three rogue cultivators, to go to the inn where he lived and wait for him there. Looking at how Su Yi was behaving, Ji Tianfu was relieved. The fact that Su Yi came to ask him about this meant that he trusted Xianjian's sect a lot. For some reason, Ji Tianfu felt a little happy about this. Su Yi soon found the residence of Liyue sect. When he arrived, more than 20 people had already packed up and were preparing to leave 9-Star City overnight. When Su Yi explained his intention, Elder Feng Qizong, Elder Gaming, Lin Donghao, Lin Bingyao, and the others were astounded. Is there such a good thing in the world? Elder Feng Qizong was stunned and couldn't help but mutter in his heart. They had planned to get close to Su Yi and ask for a few places. They didn't dare to think about too many places. If Lin Donghao and Lin Bingyao could enter the second round of the Alliance Conference, it would be worthwhile. However, the helpless thing was that Liyue sect and Overlord sect were not familiar with each other at all. They could not brace themselves to go to the Overlord sect just because they had met a few times. If the Bawang sect didn't agree, wouldn't they be disgraced? I still have 16 places to sell to you. The same price as Xianjian sect, 22,000 2-star primordial stones per place. That's a total of 320,000. Su Yi intended to leave 3 places for Chun Chu and the other 2. Therefore, Liyue sect could only sell 16 places to them. This price is acceptable. Lin Donghao, Lin Bingyao, and the 2 elders all nodded when they heard this. After the 2 sides reached an agreement, Lin Donghao smiled and cupped his fist to Su Yi and said, Brother Su Yi, if the Bawang sect has any problems in the future, you can come to me, Lin Donghao, and the Liyue sect. As long as we can do it, we will do it. Lin Donghao knew in his heart that if these 16 places were really auctioned, it would definitely be more than 22,000 2-star primordial stones. If Liyue sect accepted it, they would also be indebted to the Bawang sect. Otherwise, you can't buy this opportunity with money. Su Yi didn't stay in Liyue sect for long and left. The entire Liyue sect looked at the back of the young man disappearing, and each of them sighed deeply in their hearts, but was immediately replaced by boundless joy. Now we don't have to go back immediately. I didn't expect that we can still participate in the next round of the conference. The Alliance Conference, which was held once every 50 years, was a rare event for people under the age of 30. The most important thing was that the primary conference was to select 10 forces, and it was only a competition. However, in the second round, those who participated could obtain huge benefits. If there were enough opportunities, they might be able to obtain unimaginable gains. Many people could even cross several realms in one go, and it was normal to break through the threshold of the Origin Void Realm. With such a big benefit, no one would not be tempted. Therefore, 22,000 2-star primordial stones for a place was definitely a good deal. If one was lucky, they could obtain even greater benefits. Su Yi went all the way back, and then under the protection of Merciless West, Green Emperor, Yin-Yang Ghost Emperor, Devouring Spirit Emperor, and Huang Jian, he entered the mysterious space. In order to prevent Handsome Su from going out and causing trouble, Su Yi also pulled him in. In 7 days, the real Alliance Conference will begin. I have to go into seclusion for a few days to cultivate the Yuan Yang heavenly bone. Su Yi murmured and found a place to sit cross-legged in the mysterious space. His gaze swept across the vast space. In the small pool of spiritual liquid, a large amount of spiritual liquid had begun to accumulate. It released a tranquil aura that could make one feel refreshed just by smelling it. Then, Su Yi saw a piece of green stone placed aside. It was the one that was moved from the 7-star sword school's mine. Ju's soul stone. What kind of magical effect does this thing have? Su Yi muttered. Last time, when Merciless West went into seclusion in the mysterious space, he also saw this stone. He told Su Yi that this thing was called the Giant Soul Stone, and it had some magical effects on the soul. At that time, Merciless West was also shocked. He did not know where Su Yi had obtained such a treasure, which made him a little puzzled. From his brother's expression, Su Yi could tell that this thing was definitely an extraordinary treasure. It was no wonder that the 7-star sword school valued it so much. However, because Merciless West was in a hurry to go into seclusion, he did not say much to Su Yi. He only said that this thing could be used to train the soul, and that there were more uses for it that could be developed. I'll slowly study it when I have time in the future. Let's start cultivating the Yuan Yang heavenly bone. Su Yi did not hesitate. He first drank a bottle of spiritual liquid, then slowly closed his eyes and began cultivating the Origin Supreme technique. The 5th level of the Origin Demon Body, the Yuan Yang heavenly bone, was to absorb endless spiritual qi, turn it into one's own vitality, and gather it in the Great Void Divine Sea. Then, the vigorous vitality would be poured into the heart of Heavenly Sun, turning into the true Yang fire, and then used to temper the bones in the body. This process was extremely slow. The true Yang fire consumed a lot of vitality. Even if Su Yi's Great Void Divine Sea was filled with vitality, which was many times more than other people of the same level, it was still difficult to withstand such an intense consumption. The first time he used up all the vitality in the entire Great Void Divine Sea, he could only temper half of a rib bone. For bones like the leg bone, arm bone, and other bones, it would probably take many times before he could completely temper them. Su Yi was a little anxious. If he continued to cultivate at this speed, it would take him a few years to successfully cultivate this level. Not to mention the immense pain in the process. Su Yi could not afford to wait at all for such a long time. Huff huff. Soon, Su Yi entered a meditative state. His body was surrounded by 4 rays of light that flowed slowly. However, in his meridians, there was a huge explosion that sounded like thunder. As time passed, Su Yi's chest emitted a crimson light. It was like burning iron, and there was a high temperature. He was sweating all over, and his lips were trembling in pain because of the true Yang fire. So boring, not far away, Su Xiaoshui began to wail after looking at Su Yi for a while. He also knew the intention of his boss. Now that there were many experts in 9-Star City, there were many Origin Emperors. If he went out at this time, Su Xiaoshui knew the consequences. Therefore, he had no complaints about being locked in the mysterious space. It was just that it was really boring here. Suddenly, his eyes flickered as he looked at the small pool of spirit liquid, and his eyes began to spin around. After a while, Su Xiaoshui flapped his wings and flew out. He plunged into the spiritual liquid pool and rolled around, enjoying himself immensely. In 9-Star City, the preliminaries of the Alliance Conference had ended. However, the city did not become deserted. Instead, it became more lively. There were indeed some forces that chose to leave after losing, but more people stayed. Everyone knew that the second round of the Alliance Conference would be the real competition between the geniuses. I wonder how strong the young experts of the 3 first-rate forces, Blue Cloud Palace, 9-Star Valley, and Blood Sun Sect are. I wonder if there are any Origin Void Realm experts. In the city, some people were talking about this in some restaurants. There might really be an Origin Void Realm expert. None of the 3 first-rate forces are simple. There are many experts in their sects. Let's see who will be the final winner this time. The 7 second-rate forces are not bad either. Their overall strength may not be comparable to the first-rate forces. However, if one or two outstanding people emerge from the younger generation, it's not impossible for them to suppress their peers. The show is about to begin. I'm really looking forward to it. There's also that young man from the Bawang sect. With his age and strength, in terms of talent, he's definitely a once-in-a-lifetime talent. However, it's hard to say whether he can gain any advantage in the upcoming Alliance Conference. All kinds of discussions spread in different places. Everyone had a strong interest in those geniuses. Chapter 1052. Until now, no one seems to know his name, right? After a few days, many people were surprised to find that the young man's name was still unknown. There is news. The young man's name is Sui. Someone saw him looking for people from the Lyoha sect and the Xinjiang sect. He seems to have a good relationship with these two forces. Not long after the question was asked, someone yelled out. When the news came out, the name Sui swept across the entire 9-star city like a hurricane. Sui, one amazing young man. In a restaurant, a middle-aged man was sitting alone. He was in a white robe, had a green beard, and a white face. His forehead was full, and he had an extraordinary temperament. Vaguely, there was a special power around him that seemed to isolate him from the others. Under this aura, countless rogue cultivators would unconsciously avoid him. At the same time, it was as if this person did not exist. This was a unique aura. Some experts noticed this and deliberately avoided him, not daring to disturb this middle-aged man. When Sui was defending the ring, this middle-aged man appeared several times. Every time, he was amazed by Sui. Hearing the discussions of the people around him, he murmured the name Sui. Then, he raised his wine glass and drank it in one gulp. Those who failed to defend the ring, but performed outstandingly, have been recruited by the experts of the Alliance. Among the rogue cultivators, there was another piece of news. This was an old rule. In every Alliance meeting's primary selection, in addition to selecting the 10 forces, they would also test the younger generation. For those outstanding people, the first and second-rate forces would be willing to take them in and give them treasures. The sects of those who were selected were usually the vassals of the first and second-rate forces. In other words, no matter how many benefits were given, the benefits would not flow to outsiders. Jiangsu of the Green Sanctuary sect, Yuan Xuan of the Xinjiang sect, Lin Donghao, and Lin Bingyao of the Six Sword sect were all selected by the experts of the Alliance. Other than that, there were also quite a few powerful rogue cultivators who were chosen by the Wisdom Eye. Of course, whether or not these people would accept the benefits bestowed by the Alliance's experts was entirely up to them. However, under normal circumstances, no one would be willing to give up such benefits. After tomorrow, the real Alliance conference will begin. Time passed extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, 6 days had passed. During this period, Sui had been in seclusion in the mysterious space. It was also on this day that he finally opened his eyes and exhaled a mouthful of foul air. The great void divine sea in his body had been drained several times, and now it was full again. It feels really good. He carefully sensed the changes in his body. The biggest change in his body was his ribs. Over the past few days, his efficiency had been pretty good. He had refined 6 ribs in one go. Most of his chest had already been refined into primordial yang heavenly bones, leaving only a quarter that had yet to be refined. This efficiency was already fast enough. The main reason was because of the dense spiritual energy in the mysterious space and the powerful spiritual liquid. When a large number of ribs had become primordial yang heavenly bones, Sui also clearly felt that there were obvious changes in his body. Bones were the pillars of the body, the bridge that connected the blood and the flesh. When more than 10 primordial yang heavenly bones had been refined, Sui only felt that he was transforming from the outside to the inside. He could faintly feel that once all the bones in his body were transformed one day, there would be an even more miraculous change. What kind of origin does the primordial chaos supreme technique have? He could not help but sigh. All the strength he had now was inseparable from the mystery of the primordial chaos supreme technique. He raised his head and looked at the huge space. He wanted to know what kind of place this was and what kind of secrets were hidden behind all of this. Suyi's gaze turned. When it swept across a certain place, his movements suddenly froze. There was only a small pit in his line of sight. It was surrounded by gravel, like the mouth of a well. That was the small pool that produced the spiritual liquid. At this moment, there was a figure lying directly in the pool, sleeping soundly. Little handsome Su, you King ruined my spiritual liquid again. Suyi's voice suddenly rose by an octave, almost screaming out loud. He ran to the side of the small pool, picked up a small bird, and threw it to the ground. My spiritual liquid, Su, he was almost howling. Looking at the dried-up pool, he wanted to cry, but had no tears. Before he went into seclusion, a small half of the pool of spiritual liquid had appeared here. Now there was not a single drop left. He could only see the wet bottom of the pool. Such a huge loss made Suyi's heart ache. Boss, little handsome Su was thrown to the ground and slowly woke up. When he saw Su-yi, he called out, You wastrel, is this spiritual liquid for you to bathe in? Su-yi's eyes spat fire. He turned his head and picked up little handsome Su again, roaring at him. Boss, seeing that Su-yi was angry. Little handsome Su quickly lowered his head and admitted his mistake. I didn't mean it. I just wanted to sleep. His voice was very weak, and he seemed to be wronged. However, Sui did not buy it. This was not the first time that little handsome Su had done this. Previously, he ruined the herb field. This time, he ruined a small half of the pool of spiritual liquid. At the thought of this, Su-yi's anger flared up. He was not a stingy person. If little handsome Su really wanted the spiritual liquid, he would definitely give it to him. However, he could not use the spiritual liquid to bathe. No matter how rich he was, he could not squander it like this. Boss, little handsome Su still wanted to say something, but when he met Su-yi's murderous eyes, he immediately became weak. But soon his eyes suddenly lit up, and he said happily, Boss, I'm about to break through to the demon emperor realm. As expected, Su-yi's expression immediately changed. Hearing that little handsome Su was about to break through to the demon emperor realm, Su-yi's expression became serious. How far are you from the demon emperor realm? Do you want to try in seclusion for a while? Su-yi's expression became serious this time as he asked. If little handsome Su could really break through to the demon emperor realm, Su-yi would be willing to give him half of the pool of spiritual liquid, let alone the small half of the pool of spiritual liquid. Once little handsome Su's phoenix bloodline reached the threshold of the demon emperor realm, he would definitely be very terrifying. Su-yi regarded him as his brother. If there was something good for little handsome Su, he would be very willing to do it. Faced with Su-yi's change of attitude, little handsome Su was embarrassed, which was rare for him. He said with a blush, I'm almost there, but I can feel that this is not a matter of breaking through. It will probably take a little more time. When the time comes, success will follow naturally. Is that so? Su-yi raised his eyebrows. He carefully sensed that little handsome Su's aura was indeed much stronger than before. Obviously, he was not lying because he was afraid of being scolded. However, after hearing little handsome Su's explanation, Su-yi calmed down from his excitement. It seemed that if little handsome Su really wanted to break through to the demon emperor realm, it would not be as simple as simply providing sufficient energy or going into seclusion. This guy was completely different from others. However, in comparison, Su-yi only felt that little handsome Su's breakthrough was a little too easy. After soaking in the pool of spiritual liquid and having a good sleep, he was about to reach the demon emperor realm unknowingly. On the other hand, he was still at the second level of the origin void stage after cultivating bitterly. There was still some distance to the third level. I'm worse than a bird. At the end of the day, Su-yi still only summed it up with 4 words. If you need anything in the future, just ask. Don't waste it like this. This is already the second time. If there's a next time, I'll beat you up directly. Sui glared at Little Handsome Sue and threatened him. Little Handsome Sue nodded his bird head and did not dare to refute at all. He was extremely obedient. Let's go. The Alliance Conference is about to begin. When the time comes, stay with Big Brother. Be careful to conceal yourself, and don't let the powerhouses discover you. Sue reminded Little Handsome Sue one last time before he walked out of the mysterious space and appeared in the room. Rumble. Not long after Sue appeared, a powerful aura suddenly appeared outside the inn. A series of sounds of wheels crushing the void came from afar and approached like the rumbling of thunder. Whoosh! Suddenly, an uproar broke out on the street. Many people's voices could be heard, and it was very lively for a time. What's going on? Sue and the others quickly walked out and came to the street. They looked up. To the east of 9-Star City, there was a huge gilded carriage in the sky. It was fast approaching with a menacing aura. Pulling the carriage were 8 powerful savage beasts. Their bodies were muscular and their auras were fierce. They looked like bears and apes. Their fur was as bright as red silk and was faintly glowing. Red bamboo, bear, ape. So these are savage beasts. How terrifying. Among the crowd, there were some rogue cultivators who were looking at them in shock. The 8 savage beasts were terrifying. They could feel their ferocious aura from afar. It was likely that each of them had reached the level of Demon True Realm. Red bamboo, bear, ape as the carriage. Those are from Boundless Palace. The person sitting in the carriage must be Boundless Palace's Shang Wangshin. Someone who was knowledgeable quickly determined the identity of the person who came. Boundless Palace? What a grand display. Sui looked up and could not help but be shocked by such a huge scene. Of course, he knew about Boundless Palace. It was one of the 7 second-rate forces in the Chaos Realm and was very powerful. Relatively speaking, the younger generation of Boundless Palace was definitely much more powerful than the Gimdeo sect. For example, the 7-Star Sword School and Xianjian sect were extremely close to second-rate forces. However, they were only close to the bottom of the second-rate forces. Chapter 1053. Therefore, even though Sui was already at the Origin Void Realm, and there were many Origin Emperors in the Overlord sect, he would not underestimate the people from the 7 major second-rate forces. It would not be easy to catch up with the foundation that they had accumulated over the years. Sui watched for a while, and watched as the carriage pulled by the red bamboo bear ape entered the city and disappeared from his sight. From the beginning to the end, Sui did not see the people from Boundless Palace and the strongest person among the younger generation, Shang Wangshin. Walala, just then a gust of wind swept across the sky above 9-Star City. Then he saw a huge, ferocious bird spreading its wings and flying towards him. There were dozens of figures on the ferocious bird. Other than some older people, the leader was a gloomy young man. His face was pale and lifeless, and he looked extremely terrifying. The ferocious bird under his feet had a similar temperament. Its pupils were white, and it was emitting a gloomy aura. That is the Hell Thunder Eagle. It is rare to see it. Sui raised his eyebrows as he recognized the ferocious bird. It is the people from the Dark Een sect. The young man leading them must be their chief disciple, Sang Ming. Soon, the surrounding people recognized the identity of the people who came. The Dark Een sect was one of the 7 second-rated forces in the Chaos region. It was similar to the Boundless Palace that had appeared previously. Tomorrow, the secret realm of ominous spirits will open and the Alliance Conference will begin. Today, 9-Star City will be more lively. Many people from the first and second-rated forces will definitely arrive today. The secret realm of ominous spirits was the venue for the second round of the Alliance Conference. It was an independent space. Listening to the discussions around him, Sui knew that today was the day when 9-Star City would truly become lively. The successors of the major forces would arrive at 9-Star City. It was a grand banquet for the geniuses. Sui also started to get serious. After all, The number of participants from the first and second-rate forces was several times more than the number of participants from the third-rate forces and below. 3 first-rated forces, 80 participants from each force. 7 second-rated forces, 50 participants from each force. In addition to the 7 third-rate forces, each of them can send 20 people to enter the secret realm of ominous spirits. In total, there are 790 people. So he did some mental calculations. 790 young experts. This was an extremely powerful force. Among the younger generation of those first and second-rate forces, there were probably people who had already stepped into the origin void stage. He was naturally not afraid, but if they became enemies, it would be very troublesome. Boundless Palace Shang Wang Chun, Dark In Gate Sang Ming. He muttered these 2 names, then called out to Merciless West and the others, "There's nothing to see. Let's go." Turning around, the group returned to the inn. Not long after he left, the crowd on the street let out a series of exclamations again. As time passed, a disciple from a powerful force would come every once in a while, attracting the attention of countless people. It wasn't until halfway through the afternoon that the people from the 7 second-rate factions had all arrived. Crimson Sun Sect, Yin Shang Yuan, Jade Tripod Alchemy Clan, Ruan Zhua, Heavenly Dipper Sect, Hong Jinxiu, Purple Shadow Tower, Shui Yuchan, Green Flame Sect, Wei Chang Tian. In addition to Boundless Palaces, Shang Wang Chun, and Dark In Gates, Sang Ming. These 7 people were the best of the 7 factions, leading the crowd with extraordinary strength. In fact, the most talked about person was Shui Yuchan from the Purple Shadow Tower. She had a beautiful face, an ethereal temperament, and an elegant appearance, which attracted the attention of countless people. Moreover, she was not old, only 25 or 26 years old, which made her look even younger. He did not continue to pay attention to the arrival of these people, but he could still hear waves of exclamations. Other than the 7 second-rate factions, the arrival of the disciples from the 3 first-rate factions pushed the atmosphere in the city to a peak. Yi, who was staying in the inn, also grasped some information in his hands. Blue Cloud Palace's Shisusu and Qin Yusheng. 9-Star Valley's Jing Churan and Chao Yunfei. Blood Sun Sect's Wu Jiuyo and Fu Dongxian. These 6 people were the strongest of the younger generation from the 3 first-rate factions, and compared to the young talents from the second-rate factions, they attracted more attention. At the same time, other than the names of these people spreading in the 9-Star City, the 2 words Su also began to spread by word of mouth. Gradually, many people knew that the young man from the Bawang sect was called Yi. Yi. Could it be? Some well-informed people soon thought of some of the rumors and couldn't help but be shocked. Other than countless small factions and rogue cultivators, the people from the top 10 factions of the Alliance also quickly learned of Su Yi's identity. At night, the 9-Star City was brightly lit. There were some individual mansions in the city, which were extraordinarily magnificent. Such places were where the people from the first and second-rate factions stayed in the 9-Star City. As the experts of the Alliance, they naturally received special treatment, which was far from what the small factions and rogue cultivators could compare to. In one of the deep mansions, many people gathered. The leader was Elder Wu from the Tiangang sect. In addition, most of the others were from the younger generation, and they were led by a handsome young man. Such a person has appeared in this year's primary selection conference. It's really amazing. A young man said with endless amazement, and his face was full of disbelief. It is said that his name is Su Yi. Could he be the champion of the Middle State Sacred Martial Arts Conference? Someone murmured, "It must be him." Yang Baikuan said that the boy has a bird with him. It must be the bird that he became sworn brothers with at the Sacred Martial Arts Conference. The handsome young man was the young master of the Tiangang sect, Hong Jinxiu. He nodded and said softly, "The Middle State Sacred Mountain is looking for him everywhere." I didn't expect that the boy would come to the Chaos territory and cause such a big commotion. He is indeed extraordinary. This year's Alliance Conference will not be peaceful. You have to pay more attention to that boy. If you have the chance, kill him completely. Otherwise, he will become a huge disaster in the long run. The people around him are all very powerful, especially the suicidal Yama, Merciless West. His name is known throughout the Chaos Territory. Elder Wu looked at the young experts of the Tiangang sect and said, "No matter what, the Gimdeo sect is a force that our Tiangang sect has supported. We hope that they would be able to open up some situations, but they suffered such a huge loss at the hands of that boy. This debt must be repaid no matter what." His tone was very calm, and there was not much fluctuation in it. However, the group of young people in the hall could feel a murderous aura spreading out for no reason. He is just a young boy. How strong can he be? His performance in the primary selection conference was indeed dazzling, but it is far from enough. Hong Jianxiu's eyes flashed as he said in a deep voice. He knew in his heart that with his current strength, it might not be easy for him to achieve what Su Yi did in the primary selection conference. However, it was not difficult if he really wanted to do it. With his strength at the peak of the 9th level Origin Void stage, it was still possible for him to crush 40 disciples from a third-rate force by taking them out one by one. Moreover, the Boang sect only had Su Yi as their only disciple, whereas their Tiangang sect could send 50 people into the secret realm of ominous spirits. These 50 people were not a motley crew like the 7-star sword school and the Gimdeo sect. It was obvious who was stronger and who was weaker. It's better to be safe than sorry. After all, that boy made the Saint Mountains suffer a huge loss. This time, it's up to the young sect leader. However, killing that boy in the secret realm of ominous spirits is secondary. The most important thing is to obtain the benefits and improve our Tiangang sect's overall strength. Elder Wu looked at Hong Jianxiu and reminded him, "Don't worry, Elder Wu. I know what to do." Hong Jianxiu nodded, but the expression on his face did not seem to care. The plan to kill the Boang sect Su Yi was not only because of the Gimdeo sect, but it was also because of the significance of the fight between the younger generation. If they could kill that boy, they would definitely be famous in the world. While the people from the Tiangang sect were discussing Su Yi, the other first-rate and second-rate forces also voiced their own opinions. "Good boy, he's actually the champion of the Saint Martial Assembly and successfully escaped from the Saint Mountains encirclement. After coming to the Chaos region, he caused a series of commotion. Such a young man is really hard to find in the world." A red-robed old man muttered where the Azure Cloud Hall was. He was one of the many powerhouses from the Alliance who had watched the combat tournament. "Su Yi, huh? I've heard of his name long ago, but I've never seen him before. I'll have to witness it this time." A young man beside the red-robed old man spoke out indifferently. On the other side, a woman in her 20s stood. Her complexion was smooth, and her features were picturesque. She was beautiful and delicate. Su, the woman also silently muttered this name, and her beautiful brows unconsciously furrowed. She seemed to feel that this person seemed to be related to her in some way, but no matter how hard she thought, she could not recall it. After a while, the woman shook her head and stopped thinking about it. The champion of the Saint Martial Assembly, a disciple of the Shenzhen Gate, fought against many powerhouses from the Saint Mountain. Surrounded by enemies, he became sworn brothers. The 5 brothers shed their blood and resisted the Saint Mountain together, and finally escaped. Such actions are tantamount to giving the Saint Mountain a big slap in the face. I'm very curious. What kind of young man is he? It's an honor to meet him tomorrow. This time I must spar with him. The champion of the Saint Martial Assembly? I must trample him under my feet and make him my stepping stone on the path of cultivation. Different places and different people had different thoughts about Su Yi. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.